Welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I now call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. It is Tuesday, December 13, 2022. We are scheduled from 6 to 10 p.m. this evening. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Salt.
Here.
Mr. Pereira.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Cross.
Here.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Mr. Constant is excused, and if his work schedule permits, will be joining later.
Ms. Solotel.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Happy Dan is here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Ms. Quinn Davidson is excused.
Mr. Boland.
Happy to be here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Daniels, would you come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Rivera, would you read the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today under traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook-Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. We have one item on our agenda tonight, and that is the continued public hearing for ordinance number AO 2022-103. Before we resume tonight's hearing, I want to thank the municipal operators who have been working nonstop to clear the roads of snow so our kids can get to school, ambulances can make it to hospitals, and people can get to their jobs. It must feel at times like a thankless task, but we recognize how hard you are working under tremendous pressure. The recent snowstorms have made clear that despite being a winter city, the municipality is not equipped to deal with a significant snow event. I urge Mayor Bronson, for the sake of public safety, our schools, and our economy, fix this problem so we are not in this situation again, where streets remain impassable for days and schools and businesses are closed down. The Assembly stands by ready to help. We have shown that we want to help. When we approved the budget, it included a proactive amendment from Ms. Quinn Davidson and Mr. Dunbar that increased the funding for snow removal. However, our ability to help is limited if we're not informed of the issues facing the municipality. It was only during the budget deliberations that the administration shared the extent of the challenges facing the Maintenance and Operations Department. If more funds are needed, I hope to see a proposal from the mayor very soon. Let us know how we can help you address the problem of attracting and retaining workers, especially operators. From the comments we've been receiving from constituents, snow removal is clearly seen as an essential municipal function that needs to be done quickly and thoroughly. Our residents expect it to be done right, and I reiterate that the Assembly is standing by to help. The agenda addendum deadline is this Thursday at noon, and if it's not possible to get a request in by then, this is one case where I expect the Assembly would accept a laid on the table item. Thank you again to our municipal workers who are working endlessly to clear our streets of snow. You are deeply appreciated. Speaking of the historic snowfall this week, the Assembly has added extra public testimony options specific to this meeting, including extending the deadline to register for phone testimony, and setting up a satellite location for testimony in the Girdwood Community Room. While we're happy to offer this accommodation because of the extenuating circumstances of this week, we want to let everyone know that this will not become a norm due to the considerable staff and resources that are needed to manage the additional testimony options. I do want to say thank you to Brianna Sullivan, Kyle Kelly, and Jennifer Veneklausen for your work in getting the satellite location set up. Before we begin the public testimony, I want to review the rules for public testimony. If you already testified on this topic at the December 6th meeting, you are not permitted to testify again tonight. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each, and if needed, the chair can give a representative of a group of the Girdwood Board of Supervisors 5 minutes, but we have already heard from GBOS. The official timer is in the chambers, but as a courtesy to the people testifying at the Girdwood Satellite, I believe there is also a timer set up to help them gauge their time. Speakers will be called upon in the following order. First, we have a priority sign-up list from last Tuesday, and if there are folks here in the chambers who are on that list, they can testify first. And then we will go to the phone list. We have 11 people on the phone list. And in person here in the chambers, and I don't know, we may rotate between the phone list and in person. And then we will go to the folks at the Girdwood Satellite location. I want to note, too, that I have asked Member Rivera if he would chair the public testimony portion. Again, I recognize this is a very important issue to constituents in my district, and I want to participate as a member and give full attention to the testimony. So thank you, Mr. Rivera, for agreeing to chair the public hearing portion. I will go ahead and turn the gavel over to you.
Thank you, Chair LaFrance. All right, so looking forward to today's public hearing and all of the new options that we have, or expansive options that we have today. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the 5 folks that we have on our priority sign-up list. So I'm going to read them out loud, and if you are here, please come up and line up in the middle aisle. So I have Eben Stone, Deb Essex, Carolina Pavic, Sam Daniel, and Patrick Duran. Great, welcome. So just for everyone in the room and folks listening on the phone, you'll have 3 minutes to testify. If you can just state your name and neighborhood, place where you live, then I will start the timer. Thank you.
My name is Eben Stone. I am currently a homeowner in Girdwood, and I also grew up in Girdwood. There have been various visions of how Girdwood should evolve, the golf course, rail spur, Winter Creek area, etc. And, Girdwood residents have had a cold response to some of these and opposed them. And we were able to stop projects that were egregious. And over the years, Girdwood residents have worked hard to build our town into an outdoor adventure mecca. We have done such a great job that Girdwood has been named #1 ski town in the world by National Geographic, and often makes the list for other publications like Outside Magazine. If you read these articles, you'll see that the fact that we're still a real community rather than a resort development is one of the main reasons that Girdwood scores so highly. Since we're doing such a great job, I really don't understand why HLB and the Assembly don't want to allow us to have a voice in this process. It seems that including our input in the plan would be in all of our interests. The last meeting, you guys were addressing the homeless situation by increasing beds and overriding some of the mayor's vetoes. These measures are good and humanitarian, but they're also reactive. We're asking you to be proactive when it comes to our community so that we can avert an already budding homeless issue. Girdwood needs workers, and we're far enough out of Anchorage proper so that we can't import all the people that we need. The solution needs to involve providing housing and limiting short-term rentals. Providing housing can happen on a couple of different levels. Apartments and condominiums can be part of the solution, as well as selling small lots of raw land. And I'm running out of time, so I think I'm going to skip ahead on this, but there are a lot of communities that are dealing with the short-term rental issue. I would guess that there's a positive correlation between the onset of...
Sir, I'm going to pause your testimony really quick. So I'm getting a notice that people on the phone are having difficulty hearing you. Could you pull your mic up, please, and speak closer to the mic?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sorry. A positive correlation between the onset of Airbnb and like platforms and the rising homelessness. Recently, Sitka voted for an ordinance that requires, requires the owner of a short-term rental to live in a property for 6 months out of the year and document that before receiving their yearly short-term rental permit. I think the best thing this does is eliminate real estate speculators who buy up properties and communities and drive the price up.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. If you could just actually stay at the podium just for a second here.
Sure.
So I'm going to go ahead and give this hopefully once and only once so all the members are aware. So for folks who have questions, members who have questions and members of the public, let's please keep them to questions on their testimony, and if you need to clarify any part of their testimony, you may bring up members of the public during debate, but for now we're in the public hearing. We want to be able to hear from as many folks as possible. So with that, I'll go ahead and go to Ms. Allard.
Thank you. So you mentioned affordable workforce housing. Can you give me, and between 500,000 and 700,000 is what these are going to go for. Do you consider that affordable workforce housing for the type of jobs that will be available for those individuals in Girdwood?
I don't. My neighbor actually is one of the main lift mechanics for Alyeska, and he's been doing this job for over 20 years now, and he just lost his housing, and he can't afford to rent in Girdwood and definitely can't afford to buy. And, you know, he's integral to keeping the resort running, and those are the types of people we're going to lose if we don't get out in front of this.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. So for folks who have just joined us, thanks. Right now we're just going through the folks who signed up for priority audience participation at the last assembly meeting. So I'm just going to read the names again in case anyone joined us. Deb Essex, Carolina Pavick, Sam Daniel, and Patrick Duran. So if you are one of those, please come up. Welcome.
I am one of those. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly. My name is Sam Daniel. I am the broker-owner of Glacier City Realty, which is a local Girdwood-based brokerage. However, I do live here in Anchorage. I have also served as the land use chair in Girdwood for over 7 years when I was out there. And I was the chairperson for the Girdwood Board of Supervisors when the Whittier Police came into Girdwood. I was asked to co-chair the Holton Hills Advisory Committee because of my experience. And I'm proud to say that I think that the community has had a very good process. And that the message I would like to give to you folks is that as the RFP stands today, it needs to be amended. We really appreciate the fact that the administration and HLB has come forward with the offer of a land parcel to go be deeded to a land bank or some other entity. But there needs to be the basic asks that we had in our original letter still need to be addressed. And those typically are, and this goes directly to what Ms. Allard was talking about, which is if we're going to have affordable housing, then we have to have property to base that on. And it isn't going to be done when a free market, I mean, I'm the free market guy. The highest bidder gets the house. But we need to have at least one or two lots, preferably at least two of the larger lots that are in Holton Hills that will be dedicated to affordable workforce housing. And that needs to be done through the process of having a land bank administration entity that would be set up in Girdwood and Girdwood's responsibility. And I think that Girdwood has done a very nice job of anything I want to really tell you. What I really want to say is that we are not NIMBYs. We are not saying don't do this in our backyard. We simply want to retain, as Evan said, the character of the community. And right, you know, when I first started selling in Girdwood, a studio condo in Girdwood cost maybe $35,000 or $40,000. I have friends that are going, why didn't I buy a half dozen of those back then in the 80s and 90s? Today, you can't buy a studio condo without a bedroom at 450 square feet up by the mountain for less than probably $350,000. So, and that's just a studio condo. So it isn't affordable for working class folks. And it's the people that work at the clinic, it's the people that are in our restaurants, it's the folks that are there to help you at the resort that need that housing. So I want to applaud you for listening to the community when you were here last week and extending the testimony. I want to thank you for giving folks in Girdwood an opportunity to testify from the community room in Girdwood. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to have had a chance to speak.
Great, thank you, sir. We do have a question for you from Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you had mentioned the idea of a land bank or an entity set up in Girdwood for affordable housing. And my understanding is that an entity like this was proposed or conceived of quite a while ago, maybe during the planning for the Crow Creek Road, or maybe it was a little bit later, but it hasn't been set up for whatever reason. And so I guess the question is, I think there is a desire amongst HLB and perhaps from this body too, to do what you're describing and sort of hand over some of the land. But the question is to whom? You know, who like literally, like which 501c3 or which individuals in Girdwood will run it, and you know, if that entity isn't set up, I guess it's sort of a chicken and the egg problem, right? So can you describe when will this entity be set up so that we can give it something?
Sure.
And who's going to set it up?
Well, it's going to have to be a collaborative effort, there's no question. Girdwood Inc. is one entity in Girdwood that helped to shepherd the clinic forward that would be available right now if we wanted to use that. There is a land bank that a local group has set up that is a nonprofit at this point, I believe. Crystal Hoke, who is in Girdwood and may end up speaking tonight if she didn't speak last week, could speak to that better than I can. And I know that the Board of Supervisors is planning on putting this on the ballot, if they can, this spring, that we could begin to form such an entity. So I think what we really need, Mr. Dunbar, is time to accomplish this, whether it's 5 years or 7 years, to both establish the land bank entity and to also bring forward that workforce housing, which is one reason why things like restricting nightly rentals or having deed restrictions, doing something to make sure that these are primary residences is a very big deal. Because I sell folks to the people. I sell property to the people that have those nightly rentals, and they appreciate and need that income. But I used to have 70 rentals in Girdwood that I managed as long-term rentals. Virtually all of those became nightly rentals about 15 years ago. So there's no rental pool left in Girdwood to speak of. But we can do it. We can do the land bank thing. It'll take us time. I don't know the exact mechanisms, but there's smarter people in the room who do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I have 2 questions for you. They're simple, and I know you know the answer is really easy. Okay.
Oh, good.
The first one would be like, how long have you lived there again?
I lived in Girdwood for 30 years. I've lived in Anchorage now for almost 5 years. I'm in Mr. Vollin's district. I'm in Midtown.
Congratulations. So my question to you is, approximately 300 units, can the infrastructure, can the police force, can the fire department, and can the daycare take an uptick of 300 units at this point with a possible, I mean, that's almost, you have what, 823 families? Can you almost double that underneath what you guys have now to operate that city?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to do a quick reminder to members of the body that we should only be asking clarifying questions on the testimony presented. Mr. Salt?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll do my best. So one question I have is, you know how the process starts with the HLB, someone puts forward a request for land. How come Girdwood or GBOS or no one's ever put forward that request to HLB for land for workforce housing so an RFP can be put out? Do you have any idea on that?
How come the Board of Supervisors didn't do that?
Or any entity, any nonprofit entity in Girdwood to address this problem? Are they just expecting someone else to address it, or?
I don't think it falls into the bailiwick of what we typically have had to deal with in the past. I think there's been a lot of conversation about it, and there's definitely a need. But, you know, Girdwood's just a satellite of Anchorage, and we've had our hands full just dealing with, just like you folks are here, with roads and homelessness and all that good stuff. So I don't think the Board of Supervisors feels that they're in a position to have actually put in for an RFP. I am confident that we can find partners who will help us to make this happen.
Thanks.
You bet.
Thanks. All right, I have one final person in the queue for you, and then we'll move on. Mr. Voland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this does pertain to your testimony, Sam. Good to see you, by the way. You know, I've, in a lot of the emails that we have received and what I've heard in some of the work sessions is that sentiment. We're not NIMBYs, you know, we just, we're worried about affordable housing. I'm wrestling with the fact that when I look at the history of Girdwood in the last 10 years, I'm having difficulty coming up with instances of Girdwood supporting multifamily housing. So I'd like to ask, do you have any recollection, maybe over the last 10 years, of anything that Girdwood has done to support multifamily housing?
Right offhand, I cannot think of anything, but I will say that I am very familiar. You know, there are 21 different zoning districts in Girdwood that are residential districts. There are next to none, 0, that are bigger than a 3-plex in Girdwood. So the reason we don't have any multifamily housing is because we don't have any zoning to provide for it. There is in the base of the resort area, but that's already been developed.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. All right, so I will go ahead and, before we move on to the next person, again, echo members to please ask some only clarifying questions. I do feel like some of the questions that were just asked to that last testifier were more debate in style. So if that happens again, I will go ahead and move us away from that because we do want to be able to hear from everyone in a timely manner today. So, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Doran. I'm a Girdwood resident. Quick answer that was just whispered in my ear was that the CLT, or the Community Land Trust, did put in an application for land for Girdwood. So that has been done. My wife and I are not in need of housing. We were fortunate to buy into the market in 1999 in Girdwood when prices were less expensive. My understanding is that the average home price is over $500,000 or $700,000 now. The assembly members asked Girdwood residents that testified some questions last week, but these answers were not prepared or given. And so my testimony tonight is to include some of these answers. One of the questions was, what has HLB done to lose faith and credibility in the community? I myself sat on the Girdwood Housing Working Group for 3 years prior to the one that is currently in effect. Its primary goal was also to come up with housing ideas for the community. The chair of our committee reached out to Robin Ward and Shelley Roten, the former head and assistant at HLB at the time, and we had multiple Zoom calls with them discussing Girdwood's housing struggle and areas of HLB land that could potentially be built for attainable housing. In fact, we had a housing working group meeting with them just a few months before the RFP came out. Not one time did Robin or Shelley make mention to the housing working group that they were looking at Holton Hills and or any other development. In fact, I myself brought up Holton Hills on 2 occasions with them and was told by Robin that the lots were too big and it would be too expensive to develop. Another question, what is the price of attainable rent? Or what is the attainable home in Girdwood? It is generally considered that rent or home expense should be around 30% of income. At $30 an hour, which is a high end of many staff salaries in Girdwood, this qualifies for $1,440 a month for rent or a $218,000 home. Connie Yashimura, the developer, stated at one of our meetings that she met the intent of the RFP for affordable housing by plans to provide $500,000 homes. Based on the math I've described, it will require a salary of $87 an hour or $167,000 a year to afford this home. $500,000 is not attainable for those that need housing in Girdwood. I ask you to consider all the Girdwood testimony, letters, and meetings and vote no on this project. We need to halt this development and partner with HLB and the municipality to help us solve our housing needs. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, so that completes our priority sign-up list. So we're going to move now. We're going to do a mix.
I'm on that list.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Can you guys hear me okay? My name is Carolina, and I live in Girdwood. I've been a resident of Girdwood for the last 3 years. I am a public employee for the state of Alaska, and the second member of my house includes someone that's a public employee of this municipality. And I live on housing death row, meaning that I am a renter in Girdwood, at which point my housing could be ripped away at any point, just like you heard testimony from other people here last week in a similar situation. And I'm not talking about just resort employees. I'm talking about employees that work for your school districts, that work for your municipality, that work for the resort, that work for local businesses, that work for the taxpayers, that provide funding for your jobs. So, with all due respect, I think a lot of you are asking questions that have already been asked by members of the public. And if you listen to the 50 or so hours of recorded meetings, you would find the answers to all of these questions. So I want to bring your attention to a letter that was given to HLB September 14th, which outlined a lot of demands that the Girdwood Housing Community and the Holton Hills Advisory Committee put forth. And out of all of these demands, the best that this assembly through HLB could do is provide 2 resolutions. And I'll read you what they are. One of them is dated from October 2022, which says that all developers must submit applications for land use entitlements to the Girdwood Board of Supervisors for review prior to seeking official action by the designated decision-making bodies. CUI investments will restrict the use of any property in Holton Hills Phase 1 to not include short-term rentals less than 30 days in duration with a sunset provision eliminating the restriction when local ordinance is adopted, otherwise regulating short-term rentals. Construction access through Hightower Road is prohibited, and CY investments will restrict 25% of the developed multifamily units to be identified and set apart for rental development and not sold individually. The developer continues to engage with the Girdwood Holton Hills Advisory Committee. In November, that was amended, and I'll spare you all the other ones because it's the same thing, but it only includes the difference between restricting short-term rentals from a deed restriction into a homeowners association, which is run by Connie Yashimura. This is not what we asked for. None of these things that we outlined in September are put forth in these resolutions that were put forth for your vote. And most recently, this is the one that's dated December 6th. This only has A, B, C, D, which says, again, that they have to submit developers, developing whatever entitlements to the GBOS, and then again, homeowners association, and says that one multifamily unit should be drawn from HLB's profit and put forth to the Girdwood Housing Authority Committee.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. All right, now I do think, unless Deb Essex is in the room, I do think that completes our priority testimony. So we're going to go ahead and switch to both in-person and phone. So we're going to go 3 in-person and then 3 phone and then back and forth. So if we have 3 folks who want to testify in person, please line up. Welcome.
Good evening, members of the Assembly. I am Reverend Nico Rains. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Holton Hills Housing Advisory Committee, appointed this summer by the Girdwood Board of Supervisors. I serve with the folks of Girdwood Chapel and my family rent in Girdwood. I'm thankful for your willingness to hear again this evening more testimony from Girdwood, and also for the responsiveness that we've already experienced from so many of you as you hear our concerns about this development and our need for housing. On behalf of the committee, I'm here to urge you to delay action on land disposal until Girdwood can consent to its disposal. As you have heard from many others, without significant modifications to the development agreement, this proposal will fail to produce the public benefits our community needs from the public land. Our committee, which is composed of a wide cross-section of Girdwood with a wide range of relevant experiences, invested hundreds of volunteer hours in reviewing documents, public testimony, and also developments in similar communities around our country. We've heard you asking for specific changes that Girdwood needs to this development. Our committee originally put forward 8 requests, affirmed by our elected leadership on GBOS, and I'd just like to reiterate the 4 most tangible of the changes that we put forward. 1 is to increase density in both phases 1 and 2 by increasing the number of multifamily lots. 2, as Sam mentioned, is the transfer of land plots from Holton Hills to a nonprofit agency. 3 is seed money to help Girdwood establish and set up that nonprofit agency. And 4 are deed restrictions on a percentage of land sold to ensure that they are either primary residences or long-term rentals. We recognize that many of these asks are not entirely concrete and specific, and that was done intentionally on our part, knowing that we don't hold all of the details. As a member of our community's very thin social safety net, I could spend all night telling you stories about the people I know and the people I work with who work full-time or more and cannot afford to live any place but their vehicles in our town. I could tell you stories about my peers who are professionals working in Girdwood who are being forced out of our community when their rents are raised and there is simply no other rental unit available. And I can tell you that if the market forces continue on their current trajectory, my own family will be forced out of the community where we serve. Girdwood needs creative thinking. Girdwood needs outside the box thinking, because what we have seen and what we have seen in other resort communities is that purely market-driven housing economies do not produce workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question for you from Ms. Allard.
Thank you. Reverend, can I get your last name again?
Rains.
Ray Rains. Okay, Reverend Rains, you introduced yourself as a reverend, so this is relevant. Could you clarify with me how many churches you have in Girdwood?
How many churches we have in
And
Girdwood?
how many seats are available for the community?
How many seats in our churches?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna...
It's really relevant. I need to know this information.
Can you state how it is relevant, please?
I want to know if the population right now could take on an influx of 300 more families.
So you didn't speak to this in your testimony.
He did. He introduced himself as Reverend Rains.
Yeah, thank you,
So
Ms.
I would
Allard. But
consider, no, I would consider him an expert on knowing how many churches are in
Thank you, Ms.
Girdwood.
Allard. If you want to provide a brief response to that, I will allow it.
There are 4 organized Christian congregations in Girdwood. There are 2 buildings. I am the only full-time resident pastor in Girdwood. We would gladly accept more people, but
Thank you, Mr.
we might
Chair.
need a building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello. Okay. My name is Matt Schechter. I am a Girdwood resident. Part of my background is in forensic accounting. The Assembly should vote no on this project and insist the HLB and CY Investments work with Girdwood in earnest to revise the RFP, or we just start the RFP process over. I want to address the financial disclosure for this project. 2 main points. We are staring at a black box, and why is HLB engaged in a joint venture? The black box. The pro forma financial statement signed off by CY and HLB disclosed data for phase 1 and 2 of the development. There are no estimates for phase 3. We are staring at incomplete financial estimates and a scenario with no affordable housing. This is not a 50-50 JV. The financials show 2 types of developer fees CY Investments will receive regardless of profitability. Expected revenue should be reviewed to assess if the projections are reasonable. Revenues does not guarantee any new housing. If we go into a recession, it could be years before the land is fully developed. On the cost side, we have no assumptions for unit costs, materials, labor, fuel, and overhead. If the RFP process went as it should have, we would have all these answers. We have no multi-year cash flow statement forecast. Debt is being forecast to be for this project, but no disclosure as to how this debt will be paid off. Who is liable for this debt should the project go bad? When are CY Investments and municipalities expected to receive cash? Besides having no financial projections, including affordable housing, there are no adverse scenarios which take into consideration cost overruns and how losses might be divided. What is incremental infrastructure spent by the municipality? Are these amounts budgeted for by the city, and how much? CY Investments will not be sharing in any of those costs while reaping the benefits. Along with the black box, it raises the key question, why is HLB going outside the scope of its normal operations, the disposal of land, and entering into a joint venture? Why not sell the land at market value today and eliminate the risk of being in the land development business? I estimate the profit per acre for phase 1 and 2 of this project at $66,000 per acre for HLB. A June appraisal by McSwain estimated the value at $23,000 per acre. This has no basis in reality. It was just based off of Anchorage comps, and off the grid, the undeveloped property on Crow Creek Road was marketed in May at $100,000 for less than 3/4 of an acre and sold in 30 days. Undeveloped property on the grid is worth more. Why not simply sell the land to CY Investments for a 6-figure per acre total, take the cash up front and be done with the deal? Those proceeds could then be used to subsidize affordable housing for the community's needs. This project is being launched with the overall economy facing a downturn. Mortgage rates are now 6 to 7%. Cancellation rates for home builders have soared. Using a JV transfers risk to the HLB in the city of Anchorage when it should be shouldered by CY Investments. There is no public land for public good.
Thank you. I have a couple of clarifying questions for you, starting with Mr. Voland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if HLB sold the land at market price, would you still demand that affordable housing be built on it by whoever bought it?
So the affordable housing issue is, we need affordable housing.
But if they just sold it at market price?
Here's the math, okay? Based on the disclosure we have for phase 1 and phase 2, supposedly, if you believe the assumptions for which we have no detail of to assess, $66,000 per acre is what effectively HLB would reap, and CY Investments will receive that plus more because of the fees they receive. If you were to put that property out on the market to sale, right, throughout 60 acres, what would somebody buy for that? If we're selling property, if individual lots are going on the average of $150,000 per acre, undeveloped off the grid, across the street on Crow Creek Road, that property is going to go for more. And the fair value that they're saying is $23,000. If somebody was to tell you, I'm going to give you $100,000 up front for an acre of land, or you can take the risk of getting $66,000 in some amount of years. Which are you going to take? I think I'd take the $100,000. That's the math.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Sorry, Chair, I just went into queue.
Sure. Sorry, sir, can you come back up really quick? Ms. Allard?
And I apologize, but can you clarify what you do for a living, if you feel comfortable doing that?
Okay, so I've been in finance and accounting for 31 years. I currently am financial advisor and chief investment officer for an asset management firm here in Chicago. Prior to that, I spent 7 years managing a global forensic accounting department with a large asset management firm in Chicago. Prior to that, I worked for 8 years as a forensic accountant for an independent research firm. I spent 4 years in corporate finance at United Airlines.
I got the picture. Okay. Just because I don't want to get cut off. Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome.
Assembly and Chair Rivera, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Søren Worth. I've lived in Girdwood for 20 years as a renter and ultimately as a homeowner on Crow Creek Road in one of those houses, $100,000 lots that Matt was talking about. My wife and I are school teachers who commute to Anchorage. We were lucky to find affordable land and build a small cabin outside Girdwood in an off-the-grid community at risk of avalanche. Despite being members of a strong union, AEA, our tiny home is still the only home a teacher family could ever afford in Girdwood. Girdwood is, as Mike Edgington has pointed out, at an inflection point. We're either going to become real estate exploited for outside profit, or we can build a prosperous community with a healthy workforce, creative shops, local markets, public art, a community where people can thrive and raise a family. Girdwood's sentiment is clear. We are universally and unequivocally opposed to the Holton Hills development. It's been an abject failure in public process. Those most impacted by the project weren't even given the courtesy of a note in our P.O. boxes. And you've heard ad nauseum, we are not opposed to development. We just ask that we are included in planning. We want to avoid negative repercussions to emergency services, to our school, our daycare, solid waste, home prices, to local roads, and so on. There is an opportunity for a win-win solution here. But it's not an endless series of S versions or amendments forged in relative secrecy. After all, the community needs time to vet any new proposal. This is prudent planning. A better option is to allow Girdwood, municipal planners, and developers time to build a proposal not just acceptable to all sides, but a plan that we're all excited about. A grace period will give us time to complete an updated Girdwood area plan, to identify the low-hanging fruit, parcels of low-income housing like our Creekside apartments. It will give us time to put teeth into development codes, find ways to restrict STRs, yes, even those grandfathered in, and time to address critical infrastructure needs. This window will give us time to refine a plan that conforms with our community's vision and master plan. It gives us all time to define what kind of community is best for Girdwood and Anchorage taxpayers. We want unanimous consent for the future of Girdwood, your support for healthy communities and true public process so we can go forward with transparent economic development that both Girdwood and Anchorage can be excited about.
Thank you. I do have a question for you from Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony and for your written correspondence as well. The question, or the clarifying question I have is, we've heard testimony, and in some ways we heard it from you, that you were able to find, luck out to find housing that you could afford in Girdwood. I'm trying to reconcile the urgency with the request for a pause. To complete the Girdwood area plan. Do we know how long it will take to complete the Girdwood area plan? 12 months, 24 months?
Well, maybe, up to 24 months. It might be 16. But in the meantime, there's plenty of options for low-hanging fruit that we have many developers. Obviously, we have very many intelligent people in our community. And it's also up to you guys to kind of help us out with picking some of this low-hanging fruit for local housing. There is a distillery that's going in. They're actually building homes they're trying to build apartments onto that as well. There's 3-story structures that can be built. We just need, obviously, a little bit of land. It has been a problem for a long time, but as you all know, we're GBOS. We're just an advisory function. We have no real power. It's really been HLB that's been holding up any sort of process. It's like HLB is waiting for this big giant explosion of development rather than to make smart development that happens over a period of time. So we really just need time. Obviously, we need to get people into housing soon.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Sure. All right, so we're going to go ahead and switch over to the phone. So we're going to have 3 folks on the phone, and then we'll come back to 3 people in person. So we're going to start with Brooke Lavender.
Hello.
Hi, Brooke. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for, I actually don't have the ordinance number in front of me. Hold on. AO 2022-103. You have 3 minutes. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us the neighborhood you live in. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I am Brooke Lavender. I live in Girdwood. I've been there for 4 years now. I'm going to start out with a little spiel, and then I'm going to start reading comments from the petition that has 1,400 signatures now on it, because there's a lot of people who can't make this meeting because they are part of the workforce. We don't have a housing entity. We are transient, so the problem is seen, not solved. We were dealing with COVID like everyone else, and more housing actually became available because people came in and bought housing over asking price with the thought that they would rent it on Airbnb and weren't able to. So locals actually got housing, and then I know a lot of people who were kicked out when COVID ended or was reduced. So I'm going to start on the comments. It is truly unfortunate that this project is deeply flawed and would be detrimental to the needs of the community. We need available housing and commercial property desperately. This is no longer a Girdwood resident due to the housing shortage. We are part of the Muni and the community directly affected by the development. If it needs to benefit the Muni, then the Girdwood residents need to be part of the process and not an afterthought. It is very clear that Girdwood needs development. We are a growing community. That is running out of places for people to live. We don't need more housing that people can afford to buy in or live in, but we also realize that development of Girdwood is expensive, and we need expensive homes to create tax revenue. Girdwood needs both community housing and large homes for visitors to rent short-term. When we have both, our community can successfully serve our visitors. When our visitors enjoy their stay, they are more likely to return and for longer periods of time. I support affordable housing initiatives, and it must be clear that affordability is the priority. Affordable housing for the workforce is essential to maintaining Girdwood. We have the opportunity to learn from the housing crisis in other mountain towns. We need a traffic plan in place for both Hightower, Alyeska Highway, and Hightower Arlberg before any lots are sold. As an Anchorage resident, we have our own issues with affordable housing. Pushing folks out of Girdwood due to higher housing costs is going to add to that issue. If workers in Girdwood want to live in Girdwood, we should be able to. Being able to rely on affordable housing for all incomes, not just high-income earners. Please make sure their voices are heard on this project. Irresponsible and deceitful, 2 words I would use to describe how the Anchorage municipality has handled this project. This is the epitome of the issues suffered in Vail, Park City, Deer Valley, etc., and Girdwood has an opportunity to make it right, just as the Alaska Tribal Corporation made a situation for the Alaska Natives by not allowing reservations. This will have generational impact if not corrected. I do not support this project as it will only serve to worsen the housing crisis that Girdwood is facing. Providing luxury housing for resort rentals is not beneficial. Public land managed by HLB should be developed according to their mission to benefit the present and future citizens. I currently cannot afford to live in Girdwood even though I work there.
Thank you for
Housing
your
is-
testimony, ma'am.
Thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you so much. Next, we have Alexis Dean Shubin. Hi.
Hello?
Hi, Alexis. This is Felix Rivera with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AR 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can give us your name and neighborhood. Welcome.
Yes, hello Anchorage Assembly members and local residents tuned in tonight. Thank you all for being here and taking the time for listening to our voices. My name is Alexis Dean Shubin, and I have lived in Girdwood for the past 4 years. And just recently, I have had to make the hard decision to place my things in storage. And I'm living outside of town now currently. I'm asking that the Assembly does not move forward with the Holton Hills land disposal. As a renter for the past 4 years, I have had to move 4 times. 2 of those places I rented are the low-income apartments in Girdwood, the only apartments that are not individually owned condos. As a person working a full-time job in the professional sector, I was unable to afford living there without a roommate, while at the same time being told I made too much money to have a roommate live with me. I have some solutions that I would love the Assembly to contemplate for the future in Girdwood. Could we look into options for building apartment units made for long-term rentals that do not have income caps like the current Creekside Apartments in Girdwood does? Another solution I would love to bring up is that we must have deed restrictions on these future units to prevent them from being doled out to the highest bidder and quickly turned into nightly rentals. Perhaps a solution for when we do come up with something to help with the short-term rentals could be even a tax benefit for homeowners that rent their units long-term instead of short-term. And when I say long-term, I mean 6 months or longer. The people of Girdwood are the fabric of this very special community, and when we work together, we can accomplish great things, things that may even be said to be impossible. And I really hope with all of my heart that I can call Girdwood my forever home physically one day, but until this housing crisis and land is solved, I feel like I won't have the option to be able to have space in the place I truly consider home. So I thank you for your time tonight and appreciate everything you're all doing to listen to our voices so we can come up with a solution together.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next on the list, we have John Warner, and then we'll go back to in person.
This is John.
Hi, John. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You'll have 3 minutes if you can give your name and neighborhood for the record. Welcome.
Hi, my name is John Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. I live in Loveland, Colorado. I'm the former mayor of Breckenridge, Colorado, and I wanted to give you a little insight into what worked in Breckenridge, Colorado, which is a large ski resort town. I was involved from 1998 till 2016. There are 4 things that I think work well. Political will and governmental mechanisms to incentivize or require concessions from developers. We did this several ways. One is when we annexed property, we required the developer to commit to 80% affordable housing. In the case of a planned development that did not need an annexation, we would negotiate the number of units, the design, height restrictions, etc., to get concessions from the developer. You need a revenue stream. We did that with a real estate transfer tax in the early 1980s, a lodging tax in the early 2000s, and levied significant taxes on recreational marijuana in the 2010s. You also need land, which my understanding is you have a wonderful parcel of property, the Heritage Land Bank in the Girdwood area. You need to be looking out for land. If you have a chance to purchase land, nobody's making any more of it. It's a great idea to buy it and hold on to it. The last thing is I think you need to minimize short-term rentals or restrict short-term rentals. They do nothing for affordable housing, and they tend to negatively affect your housing stock inventory or your workforce. So those are the 4 things I wanted to emphasize. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I do have a question from Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Warner. I wanted to ask you specifics. You said restricting short-term rentals. What did that ordinance or what did that local law look like?
Well, it was multifaceted. It has just been implemented in the last few months in Breckenridge, but it created zones in the community of the town of Breckenridge where areas that had historically been hubs for short-term rentals that were close to the ski area, close to the slopes, received a certain dispensation on continuing with their rules and regulations as they were kind of grandfathered in. But there were limits put on new short-term rental licenses in the town of Breckenridge, and areas that hadn't had much in the way of short-term rentals were basically restricted to a very large degree, so that those areas were not able to avail themselves of applying for short-term rental licenses. And then there was also a $400 per bedroom assessment, yearly assessment placed on short-term rentals that went into the housing fund that helped with the housing fund revenue stream.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. My question is about, you mentioned the equivalent of affordable housing set-asides. In your community, were those incentivized in any way through either tax incentives or other incentives to make those pencil for developers?
Yes, they were incentivized. If you did not require an annexation, we, the town of Breckenridge, would negotiate the number of units per acre you could build. And the standard in some parts of Breckenridge was 11 units per acre, some were 6 units per acre. So to help the developer make it pencil, we would give them more density, or we would let them go an extra floor in height. We had pretty rigid height restrictions because it's a historic district. We also helped them procure water taps. Sometimes we decreased the fee for water taps. We helped them with building plan reviews. Sometimes we eliminated the fees for building plan reviews, development reviews. Those are all the things I can think of right now. So we had mechanisms in place that allowed us to work and cooperate with the developers, but the leverage was they then needed to commit to affordable housing that we would work out in what's called a development agreement.
Okay, Great. Thank you so much for the additional clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. Mayor Warner, down in Breck, do you guys have in your definition of workforce housing a price range?
Yes, I call it it's a continuum, really. Realistically, people in the 40 to 50% area median income realm really can't afford to purchase a home. The mortgage becomes way more than the recommended 30% of your gross income. So we built several hundred units of restricted rental development for those folks. Like a lift, and also a lift operator probably doesn't want to buy a house. He or she wants to live in an apartment and then move on at the end of the season. But for people in the 70, 80, 90% AMI category, those are people that are looking to settle down and have a for sale product that they can purchase. And so we dealt with those folks and developers to create various price points that worked relative to that. 30% of your gross income should not, more than 30% should not go towards housing. And we also applied that to daycare as well, where you shouldn't be spending more than 15% of your income on daycare for children as well. So we tried to break it up at a variety of levels. We even went to, when I was involved, to 150% of the area median income, and those were more expensive for sale products.
Thank you, Mayor Warner.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
We're going to go ahead and go back to in-person, take the next 3 testifiers. Welcome. Can you press the button again? It turned off. It's the blue button or the green button, one of the two? No, on the box, yeah. There you go.
Okay, I don't do public speaking very well, and this is my 3rd time in front of you guys for various things. So anyway, my name is Wendy Moe. I'm a lifetime born and raised Alaskan. I learned how to ski at Girdwood. My husband and I actually purchased some property in Girdwood a year ago in August. And we have plans to rebuild on the property because it has to be rebuilt. But our plans are to put a 2-bedroom apartment on the property as well as a home so that we can do long-term rental for Girdwood individuals. I've been listening to all the comments here, and I listened to you guys, and what I keep hearing back from you guys is, what do you recommend we do? What are the solutions? And I think there's lots of great comment. There's lots of great suggestions and ideas. And I think when people come up here and comment to you guys, we may not have actually the expertise to give those comments and suggestions to you. If I had the ability to develop this land, I think I'd be really good at it based on the comments that I've heard here. I hear people saying affordable housing, apartments that workers can be housed in. You can't have a resort without any workers. You also need some way to house people that go down there and recreate. The hotel has gotten ridiculously priced now, outpriced my family of 6, and I have young kids that are going to grow up skiing. We're a skiing family. We're committed to being in Girdwood and enjoying Girdwood. So I keep hearing affordable housing, apartments. I think the structure as far as what the daycare can provide and what the EMT services can provide. And if you've ever been to the grocery store in Girdwood, it's nothing. I think that you guys need to talk to developers or individuals, the Girdwood community, but also people that can, put together commercial as well as residential facilities there that can support the families that want to be there. You know, you put in a whole bunch more houses, but we don't have a grocery store to sustain that, or you don't have daycare to help sustain that. And then one of my ideas as I was listening to all this was, what about the property taxes that we're paying in Girdwood? Those are municipal property taxes, right? They just go into a big pot, I'm assuming. But, you know, what if they went into a pot to support Girdwood, just Girdwood, not the municipality as well, even though Girdwood's part of the municipality, to help that infrastructure? Because I know when we had the flooding down there, it was massive amounts of money that we didn't get help, or Girdwood didn't get help from the city in order to support those services that needed to be done. So those are just a couple of my ideas.
Thank you. I have a question for you, ma'am, from Ms. Allard.
Okay.
You're going to kill me, Felix. But I have a question for you. You said your last name's Mo, Tommy Mo? Related?
No, so Tommy is not related, but as many times as I've been asked that, he owes me dinner and ski lessons.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here. My name is Alex Prosak. I reside in Girdwood with my wife. We have owned there for 7 years, but only have been residents full-time as of 6 months ago. Prior to that, we traveled back and forth between Girdwood and Eagle River. But it had been a lifelong, well, not lifelong, but decades-long dream of ours to live in Girdwood. I really see the housing crisis as an opportunity to update the master plan. Girdwood was and still is a very small community that's really only recently become recognized as a world-class destination for skiing. Because there's such a limited amount of land in Girdwood, we really have to properly plan the way the community is going to develop into the future in a way that benefits everybody, the community and Anchorage. So I really see this as a unique opportunity to advance those needs. But in order to do that, we need to stop the current development. We don't have sufficient land to make a mistake. And Girdwood needs to be involved in the entire process, from writing the RFP to selecting a consultant and to having a member or two on the steering committee. In speaking to Mr. Edgington, he indicated that AHFC had not yet been involved. They're a great resource for affordable housing. I think we really ought to approach them and give them an opportunity to say, yes, we can help, hopefully. Mr. Dunbar, you'd asked last week about how many units we need, and I don't have that answer. But people had mentioned it's not the number we need, but it's the cost. And I ran some back of the napkin calculations, and assuming $20 an hour wage, that comes to $40,000 a year, 30% of which is $12,000 a year towards housing, or $1,000 a month, and that's not a lot. So I think that looking at mortgage rates, 80-20 mortgage, it comes out to about $200,000 as being an affordable unit. Is that possible in this current economy? I don't know, especially given the cost of land in Girdwood, the cost of bringing the infrastructure. I really think the only way to do that is probably to build up instead of out, and likely in smaller, higher density units. In moving to Girdwood, we went from 2,200 square feet to 630, but it was a sacrifice that we were willing to make because we love the community so much. Girdwood desperately needs the development, just not this development. We really need to go back to the drawing board, plan it out properly, and have Girdwood at the table for the whole process.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Logan DeMarcus. I'm a lifelong Alaskan as well, and I'm here to offer the perspective as someone who is currently renting and or trying to continue to rent in Girdwood. I serve or work as a professional mountain guide, educator, and tradesman, I currently work for 4 employers, 3 of which are local to Girdwood and 1 that operates statewide to serve the recreational interests and safety of Alaskans. My partner and I discussed voicing our position with hesitancy. There is a fear that by sharing our experience, it will be perceived as ungrateful for the home that we have luckily found. We believe that we are not the only ones with this concern. Currently, we spend just about 35% of our monthly income to live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, fully furnished, and pet-friendly cabin. This is an all too rare arrangement in Girdwood, and it feels like somehow we've won the lottery. This home suits every single one of our needs except for one, longevity. After 4 months of searching, we were offered and signed a lease limited to 6 months, ending May 1st, at which point our housing will return to a cycle of short-term nightly rentals. The relief of finding housing is short-lived, if at all. The process for finding our next home restarted the day we moved in. For us, we will continue the incessant monitoring of housing and social platforms for any available listings. We will remain beholden to open houses and rental applications due at a moment's notice. If we return to an expensive commute, I will lose or compromise work opportunities. It will continue to inhibit our ability to become homeowners and build our own equity. This process is exhausting and discouraging to the future we want for ourselves, and yet we still consider ourselves incredibly lucky. At its worst, housing insecurity is overcrowding, poor physical conditions, absent basic amenities, forced moves, homelessness, and loss of life. For some people in this community, it's outright dangerous. This is the complicated reality of Girdwood's temporary housing. To be immensely grateful for what you have, and yet trapped in a cycle that disallows you to live securely or advance autonomously. This has been normalized in mountain towns as, quote unquote, the housing hustle. Unfortunately, this status quo mindset has greater ripple effects. When you exist in a constant state of displacement, you jeopardize physical, mental, and social health, let alone the ability to fully immerse in, engage with, and positively impact any definition of community. It will force people to leave, and that's what changes the heart of small towns. We have the unique opportunity to work towards, in hopes of solving, the challenges that other mountain communities now grapple with on the back end. We have a limited resource that has the potential to build a foundation for affordable housing, replenish a workforce, and support future community development. I am asking you to please give more time to the vote on Holden Hills. Without more time, we risk perpetuating the cycle of short-term housing without solutions to support a local workforce. As Assembly members, you are elected to represent and serve the constituents of the municipality of Anchorage, each and every one of us. The Girdwood community needs you, needs us to get this right.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We're going to go ahead and switch back to the phones and do 3 folks on the phone, starting with Rosie Fletcher.
Hello?
Hi, Rosie. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AR 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes. If you can state your name and neighborhood for the record. Welcome. Rosie, are you still with us? Oh, okay.
Your call has been forwarded to an...
Okay. Next, we have Kimberly Van Sickle.
Hello, this is Kim.
Hi, Kim. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can state your name for the record and your neighborhood. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Kimberly Van Sickle. I've been a Girdwood resident for 13 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It took me years to save for a down payment to purchase a small cabin here. Many of these years I struggled to find rentals like some testimonies you are hearing. I believe that the core of our Alaskan spirit is taking care of one another. We need to remember these lessons that we learned during the pandemic. We need each other. We need essential workers to have a place in our communities. Imagine a development that would increase the size of Anchorage by about 30% was being pushed through RFP and public process with the same speed as this land disposal. I know Anchorage citizens would be questioning it and wanting to hit pause as well. The HLB needs to have more care with the public land that they manage. At best, this has been a hurried process without listening to the Girdwood community. Simply building more housing at or above market rate does not even begin to fix a workforce housing crisis. There have been many other ski towns that have proven this fact. The trickle-down effect for housing does not work. Whitefish, Montana tried this and built 1,069 new units of housing between 2016 and 2021. 7% of these units were priced below market rate, but their housing crisis worsened. A few weeks ago, Whitefish unanimously passed the adoption of their housing roadmap plan. This plan states 75% of the 1,330 units built between now and 2030 need to be for workforce housing. I repeat that, 75%. Last week, the Assembly was asking some residents for a number of units that we are requesting. If we use this as an example for Girdwood, 75% would mean in the first phase of Holton Hills alone, approximately 60 of the planned 80 units would be priced below market rate. One parcel in Holton Hills is simply not enough. My request is simple. Vote to pause Holton Hills pending completion of our area master plan as required by law. CY Investments acknowledged in their proposal that the Crow Creek Neighborhood Master Plan is expired. Using a plan 16 years old makes no sense. Disposal of public land must follow the public process. And I'm asking you to uphold the municipal codes and my rights as a citizen. Require completion of the master plan with a housing study before a vote on disposal of the land in Holton Hills. Thank you for your time and your work on this important topic. I stand with the Girdwood community and thank you for feeling heard for one of the first times in the past 2 years of community meetings.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to take a quick break to deal with a technical issue. We'll be right back.
Hello, it's Nathan.
Hi, Nathan. This is Felix Rivera. You're here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can state your name and neighborhood for the record. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Felix. My name is Nathan Ellis. I live in Girdwood. I was a nominated member of the Holton Hills Advisory Committee, and I guess I'd tell you why I was probably nominated to that advisory committee. One, I've been in Girdwood since 2001, came there as a snowboard bum, floated around, ended up at the Anchorage Fire Department where I've been working for the last 15 years as a captain paramedic. I have 2 kids that live in Girdwood. They go to the school, but primarily the reason I was on that advisory committee because I'm also a land developer. I have a development going on right now, my wife and I, and it's a downtown development. It's a mixed use of commercial and residential. So, interestingly enough, we went through the same process that CY Investments will go through, and it will end at the Planning and Zoning Commission, or at the Planning and Zoning Committee. That took us almost 2 years to complete, and so it's kind of evident of how fast this process has gone through. It's pretty amazing to me, really, because I know the steps that CY Investment has had to take up to this point. So when I was on that committee, you know, I felt like we were pretty close to a compromise through our meetings with CY Investment and the Muni, and really we just ran out of time. It was just the rush nature of this project. One of the best components of our ask, I think, actually came from Adam Trombley. When in our initial meeting, he stated that, hey, you guys need to come up with a solution to this. You guys need to solve this problem of workforce housing. And to that, in my mind, I said, okay, well, since this is public land, it's not private land, then let's benefit the community that you're developing in. And so one of our asks was the deeding of land to a nonprofit entity. And Mr. Dunbar, you asked like which entity that would be, right? So I got 2 options for you. I got Girdwood Inc. or the Girdwood Community Land Trust. And the land trust is all over the nation. There's like 206 of them active right now. But the problem is that this S version is that you're giving 1 lot. This falls very short to attaining anything meaningful. So I am a big proponent of giving solutions rather than just reiterating what everybody else is saying, which we've had some really good content. But I say this, we want 2 of the multifamily lots, but in order to provide some seed money for that, because trust me, it's not cheap, we need 6 to 8 of the single family lots with the intention of selling those lots in order to help develop the 2 multifamily larger lots. And in that way, at least we'll have a stake in this game, because I think there's a lot of good ideas that are come out of this, but even from the get-go, this has felt like the horse has already left the barn. And so I would urge you to, one, pause.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up, but I do have a question for you from Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. We've gotten a million emails, so, well, we've got many emails, so sometimes it's hard for me to track sort of who is sending us messages, but who is the head of the Girdwood Community Land Trust?
Well, it's a panel of individuals, but I think that I would have to point the finger to Crystal Hoke. She's kind of been the spearhead of a lot of these things. She would be the best one to reach out to.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. All right, we're going to go ahead and move back to in-person, so we'll go ahead and do another 3 individuals in person. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Assembly. Good evening to all of my neighbors that made another trip to town or in a queue to participate remotely. My name is Brian Burnett, and I live in Girdwood. I'm lucky enough to claim a long history in Girdwood and on Mount Alyeska. I can say to most folks that I remember Girdwood before you got here. Each and every one of us makes an impact on the fabric of the community upon our arrival. How we manage our impact should be considered as we plan for this proposed Holton Hills development. Girdwood deserves better, and I respectfully request a pause to the Holton Hills plan pending completion of the area master plan as required by AMC 2109.030.E. I am in favor of additional housing development in Girdwood. However, I am not in favor of this poorly detailed and hasty plan that is being forced on the community. Girdwood deserves better than the current proposed Holton Hills development. Girdwood has always been about forward thinking. A dozen Alaskans proposed Mount Solar back in the late 1950s, and by 1960, a four-season resort was taking shape as Mount Alyeska. Girdwood grew as Alyeska grew, and the community prospered. The vision of the four-season resort was realized through creativity, industry, and forward thinking. Unfortunately, Girdwood followed the path of most every resort town. That's why we find ourselves in this housing crisis. We will not be on the path of resolving this problem if we followed the failed development models such as Holton Hills. We don't need another CY Sand Lake or CY Eagle River development. That model is in the past and no longer valid in the future of our community. I am not opposed to development in this zone, but I want a better plan. I want a plan that deals impacts of construction and impact of the development on the community going forward. What is the plan for the thousands of belly dumps of overburden? What's the plan for the timber harvest? The impact to local trails is manageable, but what is the plan for realignments, trail improvements, and trailheads? Let's get creative and be forward thinking. Maybe the best option for workforce and affordable housing is not in the Holton Hills development. There are other sites on HLB parcels in Girdwood that would lend themselves to development and construction of higher density workforce and affordable housing sites. A site that is on a major transportation corridor and current public transportation route would be better than back in the Holton Hills development. We could develop them simultaneously. I am in favor of more housing in Girdwood that comes to the table with a community-centric, forward-thinking, creative plan that we will all be proud of to have in our community. Girdwood deserves better. Let's put a pause on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Markle. I grew up in Girdwood and currently live in Midtown Anchorage. Thank you for creating a second opportunity to speak on behalf of the community that raised me. I am opposed to the Holton Hills development because I think Girdwood deserves better. Specifically, what I would be looking for in a new development on public lands would be a proposal that was designed to serve the community's needs. And I see our biggest need right now as more affordable housing options so that the people that make up our community are not priced out. In the current Holton Hills plan, all I see is a proposal designed to make money. I get that affordable housing is denser, and I am not opposed to denser housing. I don't have strong feelings on how many units there should be, but multiple people tonight have made what sound like pretty informed suggestions for that. I also strongly support any planned development to have strong restrictions on second homes and short-term rentals, which I think should be extremely limited, as I believe they are the main problem and are really hurting our community. Girdwood is not the only mountain town in America, and a small amount of internet research brought up many articles about how Colorado's mountain towns are dealing with this exact same problem. And it sounded to me like a lot of the answer was policies. They're combating the same problem with policies that create an environment where people can actually live. This looks like limiting vacation rentals and second homes, and maybe also like developing affordable housing down the line. We cannot just develop our way out of this. Girdwood will always be a desirable place to live, and demand for housing will always catch up to whatever supply is built. So we need policies that favor middle-income folks. I've heard supporters of this development say, we should take it because if it gets voted down, there will never be another chance. And I both find that hard to believe and have little patience for getting told that this is as good as it gets. This plan does not address the community's needs, and in settling for it as better than nothing, we would only be tying up lands that could be put to much better community use. We aren't just saying no to say no. We're saying no because this is not going to benefit our community. In short, please vote against the Holton Hills development and give Girdwood time to make a plan that continues to let it be an amazing place to live and not just a nice place to go on vacation.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Dustin Darden. In recognition of seasonal climate diversity and the opportunity to demonstrate oxygen supplies and regulated growth. I propose that every 1 yard of disposable land be required to produce 1 auto-flowering, high CBD producing hemp plant for every yard. Also, I propose that we erect statues in remembrance of seasonal climate diversity so that the future generation will remember that there were people in Girdwood, Alaska, that appreciated green moss on logs. They also were above the practices of the main municipality of Anchorage, where the gate edges on the end of snow plows were not utilized when plowing roads, and 3 feet of snow
Mr. Chairman,
was
point of
put
order.
in front of
I'm going to go ahead and pause your time, Mr. Darden. I'm going to go to Mr. Dunbar for a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, the testifier is not speaking to the item before us.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. You're going a bit off of the topic before us, so if you can please, Mr. Darden, follow the rules and procedures of this chamber and speak to the topic we have before us.
The statues that would be erected on the parcels of land would be what I was speaking of. Your blatant disregard for First Amendment constitutional protected rights
I'm going to go
are
ahead
inherently
and pause
evident.
your time again, Mr. Darden, and this is going to be your second warning. If you could please just speak to the topic that we have before us, which is AO 2022-103.
For the third time, I was speaking in regards to statues being erected on disposable land. You've interrupted me twice.
Okay, Mr. Darden, since you have failed repeatedly to follow the rules of the chambers, I will go ahead and end your testimony. Thank you.
Felix.
Thank you, Mr. Darden. We're going to move on. So since Mr. Darden is causing an actual disturbance, please remove him from the chambers. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and go on a break while this issue is being dealt with. Started here in a second. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the phone. So these are going to be our last 3 folks on the phone. Then we're going to complete any folks who want to testify in person. Then we're going to go to Girdwood and the Girdwood Community Room. And thanks to everyone in that room who's been patiently waiting. Okay, so next on our phone list, we have Franz Weitz.
Hello?
Hi, Franz. This is Felix Rivera. You are here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can state your name and neighborhood for the record. Welcome.
Okay, great. Yes, this is Franz White, Girdwood resident and owner of Jack Sprat Restaurant. I guess if I begin by saying, I guess hopefully everybody's aware by now that there is a housing shortage in Girdwood for our workforce, and it is true that businesses like mine are struggling to be open to pre-pandemic levels, being the number one factor, no housing available, or at least affordable housing to anybody we would like to hire. And case in point, we recently replaced a chef in the summer, and there was no housing available, so we gave up our Airbnb in our own house to provide long-term housing for our chef, as we felt that was more important than continuing the short-term rental, even though that was very profitable for many years and helped us purchase our home in this town. I guess I would just open it up to questions that the Assembly might have. I'm sure you have some specific questions about the project and what our viewpoints might be.
Thank you for your testimony. I do not see any members in the queue.
Okay, well, if I have a little more time left, I would say I support development in Girdwood, but I think HLB took a misstep here when they went into a contract with a private developer before trying to find out what the community needed, and we desperately need workforce housing. So if the project was going to continue, we'd suggest amending it to provide long-term affordable workforce housing up to, say, 40% of the project, where that portion could be mixed use of high density and rental units, as well as options to purchase smaller homes. And we really like the bird house style cabins in Girdwood. Those seem to fit the bill for a lot of people wanting to work and live in this town. Girdwood Housing Committee would have to come up with the rules associated with who would be approved to live there and how that would work, but there's lots of models in other ski towns and other communities that are having similar issues. So maybe that's an option to keep the project on the table. The other option that's been thrown out there is to make it contingent to another similar parcel, open up another piece of HLB land that would be devoted all towards affordable workforce housing from now until the future, so it wouldn't go on to the general marketplace. It would have to stay affordable by only increasing when it's sold or changed lease to the basic minimum inflation rate. That way it wouldn't go on the market, because as we've seen, after a condo or house or property sells once or twice, then it's out of reach for the workforce community.
Thank you,
and
sir.
then lastly, maybe scrap the project and
Sir,
start
your
over.
time is up, but I do have two folks in the queue for you, starting with Mr. Solt.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Franz, you alluded to impacts to keep the restaurant open. Can you just elaborate on some of the impacts that you're dealing with, and if you've been able to mitigate them, how?
Well, we are only able to staff for 5 nights per week, and we would like to be open 7 nights per week. We feel an obligation to some degree, not just to have a successful business, but to provide for the visitors and locals that are in the town. And we feel bad when there's not very many places open for people to come eat. We mostly see that in the peak seasons, summer and winter, where there's visitors and locals driving around trying to find food and services, and we've seen that across the board, not just restaurants. But we're trying to at least staff the 5 nights. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, but one of our goals is to open 7 days per week. This holiday season coming up and open Monday, Tuesday nights. We were unable to hire enough people, and it wasn't for lack of having applicants. It was people that we could hire. We just had no housing, and they were unable to find housing as well. So that ended the application process. In addition to that, we also are renting properties in Girdwood if we can find them. I have 2 properties under my personal name that I'm leasing from other people just to put staff into. So we've created a contract with the staff member as a contingent of their employment, that they can have the housing, and if they no longer work with us, then they would vacate that housing, we're able to put someone else in. So that's something we're doing just to help provide. I think, let's see, we have 5 bedrooms, and now our rental on our personal property, so we have 6 bedrooms that we're renting out privately.
Thank you. Next, I have Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. My question is, you mentioned one of the options is developing some other parcels specifically for affordable or workforce housing. Do you think that idea could go concurrently with a development like Holton Hills?
If it was contingent on approving the Holton Hills to where another plan was in place for an affordable workforce long-term housing, there's been properties thrown out there by like Mr. Chris Van Imhoff suggesting squirrel cages. I'm not exactly sure the exact parcel number or legal description of that area, but something similar that would have similar value. And I mean, we're looking for potentially hundreds of units that we could fill in this valley and also prepare for the long term. And on top of that, address the infrastructure demands that these new buildings would create on the small community. Roads, fire clinic, the small shopping store, things like that. We don't even have a bank yet. So hopefully everybody's thinking about those things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Tim Cabana.
Hello.
Hi, Tim. This is Felix Rivera. You are here with the Anchorage Assembly. Oh, if you can go ahead.
Okay.
Mute
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can state your name for the record and your neighborhood. Welcome.
Okay, yeah, my name's Tim Cabana. I've lived in Girdwood for almost 40 years. I bought a 36-acre parcel from King Sherrier in 2002 for roughly $25,000 an acre. So today I've developed about 38 lots in Cabana land, they call it, Tanner Circle, Barron Avenue. I developed I sold the Community Methodist Church that parcel and built the Girdwood Brewery. So pretty well versed with development in Girdwood. And cost of development in Girdwood is what is killing, affordable housing right now. In order to have affordable housing, it can't be, it's not going to be, come from the marketplace, because I'm trying to develop multifamily right now, and my development costs are going to be about $170,000 per lot. Not counting the land that I bought in 2002 that the muni now appraises at $120,000 an acre. I'm getting taxed at $120,000 an acre for essentially the same exact land that I have to put sewer, water, electric, roads, gas, everything in. So, and it's about a mile from Holton Hills. So, similar property, and either my appraisal is really high or the appraisal on Holton Hills property is really low, or probably it's a combination of both. But my land is private land. I've been paying taxes on it since 2002. It's a different organization than the Holton Hills land. The Holton Hills land is HLB land that was originally given to the community of Girdwood before the 1973 unification of Anchorage and the borough of Anchorage. And Eagle River was given 3,000 acres. Girdwood was given 5,000 acres. Anchorage got about 1,000 acres. And of this land, after this was unified, Anchorage used to start at 36th Avenue, and it goes with the Kenai Peninsula Borough, goes all the way to Portage. It goes from Kenai Peninsula to the Massue Borough, basically. And
and all this was given to these communities for parks and schools and, community needs. So this land that we're talking about is community land, and if the community, should have a say in how the land is developed, a lot more so than private land, and so, and HLB getting in the business to develop land I don't really want to compete against Anchorage, the community of Anchorage.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up, but I do have someone in the queue for you, Mr. Cross.
Yes, thank you. You said you're a developer and you're developing some parcels in Girdwood. Can you tell us, as an individual who has a history of developing in Girdwood, what are specific actions that our municipality can take other than, on top of giving land away from HLB in order to create affordable housing? What restrictions and what roadblocks are you seeing as a developer that would make it more affordable for the private market to build affordable housing or build multifamily?
There's a lot of land in Girdwood, so you could build affordable housing in Girdwood. Probably not in the Holton Hills. That's going to be a little bit tough. First of all, part of that land was designated as the expansion of the school. So if you're going to develop, roughly, as much land, the 300-400 acres they're talking about developing there, all of Girdwood land put together, private land, is less than 300 acres. All the houses, all the commercial and everything else is less than 300 acres that's developed. So you're talking about doubling the city, so you're obviously going to need to build a school a little bigger. So taking part of the land that was designated to be school and turn it into residential is fine, but make sure that it's replaced so that at some point in the future we can have a school. A lot of my friends have had to move from Girdwood when their kids get to be school age because they drive them back and forth to Anchorage with high school kids. It's just not practical. And so there is land, a lot of land south off of Alyeska Highway where we used to have an old gravel pit down there. That is good land that would be cheaper to develop and would be out of, it wouldn't be right next to the school, and that should probably be looked at, if you want to build some more affordable or workforce housing. It's if you head towards south from Girdwood, about a mile down there, you'll come to that little road that goes back to the old gravel pit. And there's a lot of land back there that's on a nice gravel, foundation that would be much cheaper to build on because of just the way the land is. It's difficult to build in Holton Hills because of the bedrock, and it's just got lots of issues. It's not going to be cheap to build there. I don't see how you're going to build there. I actually looked into putting a bid in that property, and I didn't see how it would pencil out if you gave me the property. I didn't see how it would pencil out following all the rules that I have to follow. Now HLB doesn't plan on following those rules because they are the city, and that's the part that kind of irks me about me having to follow rules that HLB as a developer won't have to follow. So I'm basically going to be competing against my own government.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Last on the phone list, we have Wendy Tueller.
This is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. This is Felix Rivera. You are here with the Anchorage Assembly. We are on public testimony for AO 2022-103. You will have 3 minutes if you can state your name and neighborhood for the record. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Tueller. We built our home in Girdwood in 2002, and I'm asking that you pause this vote on Holton Hills pending the completion of the area master plan as required by the ANC 21.09E. We had to move last year to Anchorage because our kids are attending different high schools in Anchorage that do not have bus access. And we did not sell our home in Girdwood because we do plan to return as soon as we can. And I wanted to kind of touch on that housing shortage problem. We turned our home into an Airbnb, so we are part of the problem. However, we turned part of our home into a long-term rental. So we are also part of the solution. And there are pros to what we did. Selling our home, it wouldn't create affordable housing anyway. But I think having a long-term rental is helping. So my home, other pros for doing this, like I feel like my home's more protected because I have a full-time tenant. My tenant also cleans the Airbnb, so the Airbnb is providing income. I'm just wondering, how can we encourage more people with Airbnbs like I have to also have a long-term rental? I mean, is there a way to offer incentives for long-term rentals? Are there regulations we can, set up so that if you have the option, you can, put in a long-term rental? I think the Holton Hills project needs to have these types of regulations in place at the beginning. I don't know, it was asked, I think Forrest asked, how many units are needed for low-income sustainability? I don't know, but I'm sure the Girdwood Land Use Committee and other committees of Girdwood would like the opportunity to figure that out for you. Please let Girdwood be a part of this process. Projects will have a huge impact on Girdwood. It was just said that it'll be literally doubling the size of Girdwood is now. So going ahead without a master plan based on current data that has yet to be done will only lead, in my opinion, to future problems that will bring us right back to where we're at now in front of you guys. So I'm concerned about the effects Holton Hills will have on our volunteer fire department, child care facilities, police, post office, etc., traffic flow, our schools, and we need to move forward with a master plan. If the lands allocated for the future school expansion in high school are being sold and developed into Holton Hills, where is the new allocation for future school expansion going to be? What is the plan for that? It would be great if future generations of Girdwoodians didn't have to plan to move out to attend, so their kids could attend high school like we did. I think that moving forward, we need to have transparency and we need to allow Girdwood to participate. And that's what I have to say, so thanks for hearing me.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, that completes our phone list. So we're going to go ahead and go back to in-person. Welcome. And if you can press the button, please. There you go.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Naya Kramer. I want to say thank you to the Assembly for holding this opportunity for extra public comments. I was born and raised in an off-grid community up Crow Creek Road, 5 miles outside of Girdwood, and I've lived there my entire life. I was enrolled in Little Bears. I attended Girdwood K-8 school, and my only option for high school was the hour-long commute to Anchorage. And when I am home from college, I stay with my parents and I work 2 jobs. I clean short-term rentals and I bus tables at the Double Muskie Inn. And like many others in my community have said, we are not anti-development. Girdwood is in desperate need of affordable housing, as you have heard, but the key here word is affordable. Last week, Assembly members asked questions about what density and what kinds of housing we needed in Girdwood, and I think the solutions we need to focus on are predominantly housing costs in addition to density. People should be able to live in these units living off minimum wage, which I wanted to just remind, because someone mentioned earlier was like $20. It's like barely above $10. At my 2 jobs that I work, one of them I make $10 an hour and the other I make $20, which is great, but minimum wage is barely above $10 in Alaska. So I don't think we need to be, something I wanted to talk about is that I don't think we need to be afraid to build vertically in Girdwood as long as there are commercial and residential spaces, because I think this could encourage more local businesses to open up. As a young person who wants to have my own place once I finish my degree in Girdwood, I think more high-density, low-income housing in addition to more commercial space would be extremely beneficial in Girdwood. Something I know we discussed earlier was how Girdwood does not have the infrastructure to have a massive influx of more people. We deal with this especially in the summertime when we have these massive influx of tourists. And so, yeah, if we had 300 more units of people, it would be a massive thing to deal with. So I think building vertically is a really good idea because then on these bottom spaces of these apartment buildings, we can have more commercial spaces, specifically things like grocery stores, because we do not even have a grocery store. We have a Merc. It is at best a general store. It has literally 4 aisles, and it gets stripped bare in the summertime when we have massive influx of tourists. So that's just my input. I think building vertically is a great idea, and I don't think we need to be afraid of it. Yes, Girdwood has this amazing, beautiful natural beauty in our valley, but I don't think having vertical buildings will get rid of that. I think it'll just add to it and modernize Girdwood, and I don't think we should be afraid of that. So, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Evening, everyone. My name is Joe Bell, and we now split time, in South Anchorage and Girdwood. My wife and I previously lived full-time out in Girdwood for 7 years, commuting every single day back and forth in order to live out there. Some of the struggle you've heard about. We've had our own struggles in wanting to become full-time residents out there in Girdwood. Moving 6 times over 5 years, it's kind of funny because Wendy Tueller, who we just heard from, we lived in her house. We ended up purchasing Sam Daniel's house. I think more listening to all these people come up and give their stories is reminding me how much character we have out in Girdwood. Earlier this year, one of our children ended up having an emergency, and the fire department was there in a matter of minutes, and it concerns me that we had all these new residents out there. We don't have the infrastructure to support it. And I'm absolutely all for development. We are developers ourselves. We are real estate professionals. We have a development going on. And hearing about Holton Hills and the municipality's support brings up a level of competition that I really hadn't thought about until I heard it over and over during some of these testaments. I'm going to have to be competing against the municipality for my upcoming project, which could have 20 to 26 units on that piece of land. So if you want to have a conversation about ways to subsidize or ways to allow us to build differently out there and go vertical, as mentioned, I'd love to have that conversation. And it's very interesting that you're hearing from all these developers because we are so pro figuring out a creative solution to some of the challenges that we have, right? And it will take your input on how we can do so. A couple other points outside of the municipality and their profiting. The awardee, the group, is no longer even together. So how does that remain feasible when you don't have the same group that was awarded the bid not moving forward together? So I am a fan of halting this or putting a pause on it so that we can allow some of the characters of Girdwood that have built an amazing community, that have come out and shown support, to provide input on ways to really build something that could be great for the future. And I mean, there's a ton of smart people here. I mean, just listening to Matt, holy moly, the background. So I would just say, give us the opportunity to provide input and work with the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you mentioned going vertical. How many stories are we talking about? You're going from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4? Any idea?
You tell me, right? I'm game for whatever, right? I mean, ultimately, I think that there's enough value out in that community and enough people that want to support changing some of those restrictions that we could go whatever the municipality would allow. So, I mean, if you went 4 or 5 vertical and you did 4 or 5 units on each floor, I think that would provide a great opportunity without getting too much brick city, right? That's not what we're looking for. We still want to maintain the character of the valley and really create something cool out there, not just a bunch of box houses.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cross?
Yes, thank you. I'll ask you kind of the same question I've been asking some developers who are working in the area, and that is, listen, I understand that land costs are a substantial burden to building affordable housing. So then the question then comes, what is affordable when you're talking average monthly income? But whether it's Holton Hills or whether it's anything, we understand it needs affordable housing. What else is in the way of developers? I mean, we understand it's land costs. We understand it's even a place for contractors to stay, a shortage of housing, so they're driving back and forth. That runs up labor costs. What is it as far as developing in Girdwood, working with our building department, Title IX? What other specific things have you recognized that are just creating so many issues for Girdwood to get housing?
well,
I mean, there's 5,000 acres of HLB land out there. It seems to me like we have some opportunities.
You don't have to remind us. We're well aware.
I mean,
so, yeah, I mean, outside of logistics, right, and some of the restrictions that we're allowed to perform in, I mean, the cost is the biggest thing, right? You can't get around that piece of it because of how accelerated the evaluation has become out there, right? And I mean, ultimately, the municipality is going to gain down the road with the taxes and everything, you know, more value brings more taxes, brings more money, you know, but realistically, it's the restrictions of what we're allowed on a property. So we've got a current development, we're able to put 9 units on 1.25 acres, right? We're not going to do that because it just feels so crowded given the restrictions. And then looking at the 3-acre parcel that we're moving forward on, we can do about 20 to 26. 26 feels really tight, right? So if we had the ability to, you know, go more vertical or figure out a way to add a little bit more density, I think it would speak volumes for the opportunity because, you know, we have to go into that property and we're looking at 700 to 1,000 square feet, very birdhouse-esque, and we're trying to figure out how to keep these things around 300,000, 350,000, and it's really hard when you have $700,000 to $800,000 just in dirt work.
well, thank you, and I appreciate that. So, you know, we're hoping that what Volin and I worked on in Dunbar as far as reducing parking minimums to allow you to utilize more of that really expensive land will benefit.
Right.
But I'm at another time, I'd like to speak with you and others just what other obstacles have we unintentionally created that make it difficult for private development?
Yeah.
That we're in a situation now where unless you get the land for free, it doesn't pencil to, I mean, it doesn't provide affordable housing. I mean, the numbers I ran showed that, you know, at $300 a square foot, which is the quote I was getting because the price, I mean, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 900 square foot is, you know, have to rent out for $2,900 a month.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's well over the average mortgage payment in Anchorage just for a tiny little apartment in Girdwood. So,
Thank you. It sounds like
Thank
this
you.
conversation is going to continue offline. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mark Melkert. I live in Second Edition. I also have property in Girdwood since 2010. Through the chair to Ms. LaFrance, going to one of her earlier comments, I got stuck parking downtown next to the Captain Cook today, but I did get a parking ticket. And so our government works in a sort of what seemed to be a perverse sort of way. And I've been listening to all the work sessions, I've listened to the community meetings, I've listened to the assembly meetings, and it seems to me it's a little bit of the same situation here. You as a body are being asked to approve the biggest land disposal in Girdwood in decades without the municipality having done the planning to support it. And I think that's what you're hearing from the community, and it's not just a bunch of NIMBYs. It's business leaders, it's leaders of nonprofits, it's the GBOS, it's the working committee. And why is that? It's because the plans are out of date. And that's just the fact. And the municipality knows that. In 2014, it was necessary to update the town site plan for the new town site to approve changes to Egloff Drive for the new fire station and the community center. And at that time, the plan for that says that the 1995 plan is overdue for an update. That was 8 years ago. In 2007, the planning department conducted a survey in anticipation of updating that 1995 plan. That's 16 years ago. It reported the results of that survey. The overwhelming concern is affordable housing. Another concern noted by MOA Planning was that development needs to follow a plan. The HLB is asking you to plan on the fly here. I think the Assembly members have asked some great questions. There's some great ideas. The community has stepped up and committed hundreds and hundreds of hours to looking for solutions to the problem that's facing the community. And it's only after putting an RFP on the street, seeking a development consistent with what have been known to be out-of-date plans for at least 8 years, that the municipality is working to update those plans. And on the website for the planning department, the information that's going to be used to update that plan start with the survey from 2007 that reflect views of the community 16 years ago. I think what you've heard from the community's testimony here is that those plans from every level are out of date. And so you're being asked to approve a disposal. The right answer is pause it and ask for answers from planning. What is the answer for this community? I don't think you have it.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can you, oh, there we go. My name is Sarah Gottstein. I live in Girdwood, and I built a home there. I'm a fourth-generation Alaskan. My grandparents watched Anchorage grow from 3,000 people to 300,000 people, and our family participated in a lot of development in Anchorage. Our family learned in developing land in Anchorage that it needs to be done responsibly and to meet the needs of our amazing community. Girdwood is a valley with limited space, and our land must be developed responsibly. The area master plan is outdated, it's no longer responsible, and it's no longer relevant. A big issue facing Anchorage is homelessness. You are all intimately aware of this. I currently work with this population at the Power Center and at Alaska Seeds of Change. A development like the proposed Holton Hills only continues to reinforce the housing crisis that eventually forces people into experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, and will inevitably change the infrastructure of our wonderful community. I live on a street with 66 Airbnb beds that were once filled with neighbors, coworkers, and friends. We need a better plan, and we need to be involved in the process so that we can meet the needs of our community and effectively house its members. We are a ski town, and we need a diverse array of housing to meet all the needs of the residents, workers, and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, Irene Quidno. I don't live in Girdwood, but I don't need to live in Girdwood to know about affordable housing. And I think rental units need to be available. I have a pretty decent job, and I have looked into purchasing a condo, and I might be able to swing the mortgage, or was a couple of years ago, but what I can't swing is, in addition to that, a $400 condo association fee. And that has prevented me from purchasing anything, because once I purchase something, then I have to pay gas and electric, and then in addition, the taxes, and in addition, the condo association fee. So if you want to provide affordable housing, you also need to provide regular rental units. I have come to this assembly since 2020, and again and again and again, you have said, in regards to the homeless, housing first. We need to house the homeless to give them a stable environment so that they can become productive people in our society. Well, from the testimony that I've heard, you have working people who have full-time jobs who are now living in their cars in Girdwood. Those are homeless. You have people who are at the brink of being homeless constantly. So where's your commitment to providing housing first in the Girdwood community? Now you can put your word to action and not approve the development that is only for people to purchase. And lastly, let me start my last statement with that I am totally aware that nobody who's running for office is in control who contributes to their campaign. But in 2022, Connie Yoshimori has contributed twice to Forrest Dunbar's campaign. And I'm not accusing you of anything, but the optics are really bad in this particular situation because Connie Yoshimori is the developer who's doing this development. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hello, my name's Greg Clark. I've lived in Girdwood for 4 years. I actually work for Franz Weiss.
Could you repeat your name one more time, please?
Gladly. My name is Greg Clark.
Thank you.
I've lived in Girdwood for 4 years and I've worked for Franz at Jack Sprat for the last 3 years. For the last year and a half, I've been a sous chef there. I've been a chef in town since I arrived. I moved from Park City, Utah, up to Alaska in the hopes of opening my own butcher shop and bread bakery. And will not have the opportunity to do that in Girdwood unless this project is paused and we're able to find ways to create vertical housing. As has been mentioned previously, something with commercial real estate on the bottom floor and housing on the top floor is really the only way to go forward here. Congressman Peters, or Assemblymember Peterson, Congressmember maybe, one day. You asked like how many stories we want to go. Alyeska Resort is 8 stories high. I don't think we want to go that high around the entire valley, but 4, 5, 6 stories isn't out of the question. I mean, we're going to have an influx of 10 to 20,000 people move there over the next 5 to 10 years that this project is projected. We're going to need more housing. I don't know. Those are numbers I'm pulling out of a hat. Like, I'm a chef. I don't really, this is all very new to me. But I want to see this community thrive. I've been lucky enough to be housed by both of my employers at one point. In the 4 years that I've lived there, I've moved 6 times and have lived in my car a number of times as well. I'm lucky enough that I even have a car. And I do just want to thank you guys for taking the time last week and this week to come down here in both of these wonderful driving conditions and listen to all of our testimony. So thank you guys.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you. All right. My name is Tommy O'Malley, and when I moved to Girdwood 37 years ago, I was welcomed kind of like cannibals would welcome you to dinner. People wanted to find out what my skills were, what resources I could provide, not so much resources like money, but what could I do that would help build a sense of community? What could I contribute? And since I moved to Girdwood, I've been on every committee in town. I spoke to you guys about the cemetery not long ago, and that's one of the projects that really makes a community a community. I also served on the Girdwood Board of Supervisors for 2 terms, and so I know what it's like to sit at long, boring meetings, and I thank you for your service there. I have a maybe unusual situation. I paid off my mortgage last year, living in Girdwood 30 years, and we were able to buy a house because the Meistrom's Olympics bid failed and the prices came down, so we were able to get in. But I could have bought a house in Eagle River or Wasilla 3 times the size of my 1,000 square foot house. My objection to the way things are happening is because of the way Heritage Land Bank works or has been working. I really question their ability to manage a development of this size. there's a profound lack of qualified people working at the Heritage Land Bank. It's gone from a dozen people when I've done projects with them down to about 3. I don't think they have a director anymore. They've been very unresponsive to the current contract holders that they're managing, like in our industrial park. There's been a lack of transparency. They haven't followed their established operating practices. Holton Hills is not on the 5-year plan. It's not on the 1-year plan. What's HLB putting in? They've committed millions of dollars with no oversight or any authorization, but they've gone ahead and done that. They're leaving the decisions to Homeowners Association, which will be the owners of second-family homes there in Girdwood. There won't be any locals that can afford to be on that committee. Some of the community's needs must be part of the contract administrative order, and I believe Meg Zalatel is working on a compromise. I ask that you vote yes on her compromise, ordinance S1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for hearing us all this evening. We appreciate your time. My name is Brittany. I am a member of the Girdwood community, now a homeowner, and also a board member of the Community Land Trust, the Girdwood Community Land Trust that you've heard some of here this evening. To start off, my story starts like many others to Girdwood. I was a ski bum traveling up to find a town that was your quintessential ski community. I moved here from Colorado. Many of the communities in Colorado have been overrun with a lot of the troubles that we're presented with here tonight, and that was a lot of something I was trying to escape. I had seen Girdwood as this key little niche that doesn't exist in many places. Upon coming here, I had met many great friends, many of which were already working and struggling with the problems that we see here. I myself even lived in my truck for many, many months working at Alyeska Ski Resort before establishing an actual rental. I want to correct the record for some of the things that have happened or have been discussed this evening. One of the things, the Community Land Trust presentations and discussions have began in public meetings in 2019. We already had a housing problem at the time, and Housing Committee was meeting monthly. Girdwood Community Land Trust, after many hours of discussion at Housing Committee, research of other ski resorts communities, formed a non-governmental, nonprofit board, became a sponsored organization of an existing 501c3, and submitted application to Heritage Land Bank in December 2020. The disposal guide published at the time led us to believe that we would receive an appraisal on the property, and that we would receive a dollar amount expected to pay for the land, and business plans could be prepared for submission. We expected this process would take time, requested inclusion into the 2021 work plan, and believed that site control for future community assets as critical to long-term success as a community. We specifically listed housing for the workforce as a need for the land. You have heard that the Spinell Homes submitted the first application as it was published in the Anchorage Daily News. We are attempting to correct the error. 3 months after submitting our application, we were reached by Spinell and advised to turn in an application in February of 2021. It was discussed by HLB representatives on public meetings that because they received 2 applications and because Spinell's was considered complete, it would be going to RFP. This contradicted what many community members have been told by the HLB, that development would not occur until the new plan was completed. When we saw that, Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Does anyone else in the room wish to testify? Okay, not seeing anyone, then we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break while we set up the Girdwood Community Room. Girdwood Community Land Trust. If you could come up here, please.
Sorry, no,
So we're going to go ahead and get ready to listen to Girdwood. From Girdwood. We've been listening to Girdwood. Okay, so this is going to be something a little bit new, a little bit different. So obviously we can't see the folks in Girdwood, and as I understand it, there are about 17-ish folks who wish to testify in the who are at the Girdwood Community Room. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do the traditional welcome, and then whoever it is, state your name for the record, your neighborhood, and then you will have your 3 minutes. You probably won't hear the timer, although as I understand it, you actually have your own timer there. But the official timer will be the one that's here. So once my timer goes off, I will let you know, and then I will thank you for your testimony. Then if there's no one in the queue, the next speaker may speak. So we'll try to do it in an orderly fashion, but we'll see. This is the first time doing this. Okay. Yes, and the clerk reminds me that just for the purposes of us hearing in the assembly chambers and for the record, I think it's important that folks in the room remain quiet and that there only be one person speaking. Okay, so with that, welcome to whoever is the first speaker.
Thank you for taking time to hear our testimony today. My name is Guy Wade. I am a Girdwood resident. I've been here 24, 25 years. And so, yeah, I would like to speak first about respectfully requesting that you vote no today on this ordinance. Is he? Okay. Just to let you know, I'm not against development, and I appreciate the need for increased housing inventory in our community. I think it would benefit Girdwood, but I am against, or not against, but I do have an issue with the process so far, and I would like to reevaluate this development agreement and possibly start over. So I think last week we heard from the community of why the development agreement as it's written does not fit our community needs. I think we need to concentrate now on how we can make that right to fit to match our community. There's been lots of back and forth, and I sure appreciate it from the assembly members with ideas and questions on how we can, what this should look like. And I've noticed, you know, the amendment to your proposal here, A through D, and I think those are good starting points, but I don't think that gets us where we need to be in the end. But I do appreciate the good faith effort from the Assembly to put those forth. I think the how will be a fairly long-term process. You know, the original RFP came out, and the one that the HLB selected had kind of part of I think the reason they selected it is because they thought that it would fit our community needs. It was with three different people on a team. It was CY Development, Pomeroy Property Development, and Seth Anderson. And I quote here, in the RFP, they touted that the opportunities for builders, private parties, and nonprofits to create affordable housing, workforce housing, single-family units, as well as resort-centric housing, and the team believes in the vision for diverse residential development that will meet many of the community and resort housing and lodging needs. This proposal was highlighted at this, is that 3 minutes? Oh.
Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue. The next individual may speak.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Janine Hutchins, and I've been a resident of Girdwood for 10 years. I'm also the general manager of Alaska Wildland Adventures, and our home office is here in Girdwood and has been for decades. In the last year, 4 of our 9 staff members had to leave Anchorage because they could not find housing. That's 4 of our 9 staff that we lost in the last year. My husband used to own his own business here in Girdwood, but had to sell the business because 1, lack of commercial space, and 2, he could not find any employees that could find housing here. So there's some big impacts to my family in respect to the business opportunities here that are not available because of the lack of workforce housing. I'd also like to bring up 3 main points that have been brought up before, but I really want to put a pin on these. 1, I know you all are rule followers. We elected you all to follow the rules and help update the rules when they need to be updated, but this one has not followed the rules. The 3 different entities that submitted to the RFP are no longer a team. It is no longer those 3 entities. So it's not even the same proposal. It's different people. So how could that move forward? 2, it said that it would have workforce housing that was affordable, and then CY Investment says that the cheapest thing is going to be $500,000, which is $500,000, which we already talked about is not considered affordable housing or available for workforce housing. And then last but not least, according to Anchorage Municipal Code 2109030.E, a area master plan is required by law before moving forward with this type of development, and our plan is not updated. So it's different people that applied and who now is running this proposal. It is doesn't include what it said in terms of affordable workforce housing, and two, it's not following the rules where you need to have, by law, by the Municipal Code 2109030.E, an area master plan prior to moving forward. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I appreciate you all supporting us in making sure that we have a development program that follows the master plan and that provides workforce housing so that we can have reliable, open businesses and have the workforce we need to continue to keep this community running. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next person to speak.
Ben Kohler. Good evening, members of the Assembly. Thank you for your time. My name is Ben Kohler. I live in Girdwood. I have with my wife and my son for the last 15 years. My request is simple. Please vote to pause Holden Hills pending completion of the area plan, master plan as required by AMC 21.09.030.E. The area master plan is required by law, acknowledged by CY Investments as needed, and exactly the due diligence that we are asking for. Disposal of public land must follow the public process. I'm asking you to uphold the municipal codes as my right as my right as a citizen. Require the completion of the master plan before a vote on dispensing of this land for Holden Hills. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Leiden. I live here in Girdwood. I've worked for the Forest Service here in town for the past 12 years. I'm not representing the Forest Service tonight, though I'm speaking on behalf of myself. When my husband and I arrived to work on the forest back in 2010, there were no rentals available. Luckily, our employer offered us housing at the local bunkhouse. Don't get me wrong, we were extremely grateful that we had this option. But conditions were pretty challenging. We were in a small room, had 10 other roommates half our age, and we shared a kitchen and 2 bathrooms, but we had no choices. We ended up buying a house, which we couldn't do nowadays, but I continue to see this very real housing struggle amongst my fellow coworkers. Case in point, our beloved visitor center manager of 5 years is moving because she can't afford housing here, despite her decent living wage. She's been such an incredible leader, and filling her shoes will be very difficult and may take years. This is a disruption to our staffing, but it's also a disservice to the 40,000 people that visit the center annually. We have another respected and hardworking employee who currently has a rental, but has been looking for an alternative space due to the noise. It's proving to be an impossible task because she has a dog. Plus, so many of our long-term rentals are locked up as Airbnbs. I've heard so many stories about coworkers concerned about losing their rental and the worry of finding a new one. This is so nerve-wracking. These are real housing crises that our public servants face. They are skilled, dedicated, and passionate about their jobs. Most of them, like my husband and I, have moved to South Central Alaska with everything they own to work for this agency. But not only are these people the face of our Chugach National Forest, they also sit on the boards of our local nonprofits. They volunteer in the community and in our schools. They DJ for us on our local radio station. They teach classes, and they help make sure our votes are counted on Election Day. These people are the thread of this community. It's breaking our hearts to see our hardworking community members leave one by one because housing is getting less and less obtainable. We watched it happen with our daughter's incredible piano teacher, a healthcare worker and ski patroller, and our coworkers. Who will serve our community's needs if we don't have any place for them to reside? I ask the Assembly to unanimously vote no on this proposal and approve a resolution to delay development until Girdwood has completed its area plan to ensure public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Hi, my name is Catherine McDermott, live in Girdwood. First arrived to Girdwood, and my husband and I lived in a cabin with no running water for about 4 years before we were able to buy our home, which we bought about 20 years ago. My first choice is that the Assembly votes to pause the current Holton Hills Agreement and allow Girdwood to finish an area plan. The Assembly needs a proposal that aligns with an updated area plan and one that addresses the current housing needs of Girdwood. Task the GBOS with completing the Girdwood area plan with assistance from the Planning Department before allowing disposal of these lands. Any subsequent development to move forward needs to use the advisement of the next 25-year Girdwood area plan. In my mind, the ordinance before the Assembly right now is not worthy of consideration because it has avoided the public process. Any disposal or development proposal that the HLB puts before the Assembly needs to follow the processes outlined in Title 21. Refer to the analysis provided by Girdwood resident Kelly Okonek via email to you this morning for details of how the development process should have worked and what actually happened. I do not believe that the ordinances are merely suggestions. Back to the beginning, under Title 25, the disposal of Holton Hills should have been included in the 2021 HLB annual work plan and the 2022-26 5-year comprehensive plan that was approved by the Assembly in 2020. That work plan references completing the Girdwood area plan, Imagine Girdwood. Area plan completion relies on volunteers and requires funding for those efforts. Girdwood is working on it. We have a plan that is well underway. COVID and funding have delayed completion. And I believe that the delay in this completion of this plan has allowed the Holton Hills process to move forward at a faster pace as to avoid being subordinate to a completed Girdwood area plan. The HLB and Girdwood have successfully worked together to see our library built on HLB land, to manage trails and public lands for recreation, and for development of the industrial park. In addition, the HLB should provide guidance on the development of the Girdwood area plan. Girdwood can do the work to move this forward. Much of the work has already been done, but updates that consider the current housing climate, long-term rental stock, and the needs of local businesses needs to be finalized. Let Girdwood complete its area plan and then move ahead with a development for Holton Hills that is smart, considered, and truly for public benefit. I would like to see about 25% of the single-family housing lots be deed restricted and be constructed with mother-in-law specifically. I will get you my written comments tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next individual to speak.
My name is Bob Dugan. I'm a 44-year resident of Girdwood, so I've seen the valley fill in. I object to Holton Hills. It's too much. It's too fast-tracked. Some of the major flaws are the overloading of Hightower Road and Alyeska Highway with dense truck traffic, particularly when it's being directed right through the heart of a town. There's no need to develop so much so fast. And also, as currently conceived, there's minimal workforce housing. I recommend a total reevaluation. I think we need to provide more low-income housing. Community needs it and wants it. We need to make access for Holton Hills, if that property is ultimately developed, tie into Crow Creek Road rather than disrupt the school and the community center. I realize that our developable land in Girdwood is constrained by avalanche zones, wetlands, and other factors. We don't have the luxury of spreading. We can't sprawl. Therefore, I think we need to slow the pace of development so that there's something left for later years and generations, not just develop everything we can as fast as we can right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Hi, Assembly members. Thank you for listening to us today. We appreciate you putting in this time. My name is Jocelyn Stinson. I live in Girdwood, and I am going to just reiterate what all of my community members have been saying, and that's that I would like for you to pause Holton Hills pending completion of the area master plan. I am a teacher in Girdwood. I have been for the last 13 years, and I've lived in Girdwood for the last 15 years. And as a teacher, I have seen many families move away because they couldn't afford to stay. And I've heard a lot of talk about workforce housing, and I fully support that, but I also want to talk about the need for family homes for people that can live here and be part of our community. And that has been mentioned as well, but I just think that whatever we decide to do in the future with our master plan, we need to make sure that we have some restrictions set aside so that not all of the new homes being purchased are second homes and vacation rentals. We need to make it possible for families that want to contribute to our community to be able to live in our community and raise their kids in our community. So just to say once again, one other thing I wanted to talk about was that currently the staff at our school, most of them own homes here in Girdwood. We are looking at potential retirements in the next few years, and so there is a concern that some new teachers that we would like to hire on might not be able to find housing to be able to work here in Girdwood. So just once again, we ask that you please pause the Holton Hills and complete the area master plan before moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Doug Heckner. I live in Girdwood. Moved here in about 94. My request is simple. Vote to pause Holton Hills. Pending completion of the area master plan is required by AMC 21.09.030.E. The area master plan required by law, acknowledged by CY Investments as needed, and exactly the due diligence we're begging for. Disposal of public land must follow the public process, and I'm asking you to uphold the municipal codes and my right as a citizen. Require the completion of the area master plan before a vote on the disposal of land in Holton Hills. And there's been so much good testimony that's come forth in this and throughout the whole process, and it feels to me like, without regurgitating a bunch of specifics, these issues are real. They need to be addressed, and the size of this Holton Hills development and the location of it with respect to the town site is such that it's not appropriate to continue this until we have these other factors digested and planned for in the area master plan and other means. Thank you for taking my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Adrian McGill.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to give us this opportunity to speak about this matter. My name is Adrian McGill. I am currently a resident of Girdwood for just a few more weeks. I, like many, want to implore the Assembly to please halt the Holton Hills development and find a solution that works for this community. We need a development for the community that will serve what we truly need, and completing the area master plan is one step that will help that process. I am not an expert in this process at all, but I've heard my community members. I've heard the outcry. I've listened to the community meetings. I've read whatever I can, but I'm not an expert, but there are many people around that are. But I'm just here to share my story and how, this whole process has kind of really upset me and disappointed me. I've been a Girdwood resident for 4 years. For the past few years, I have been looking to purchase a home to put down roots in this community. And I heard about Holden Hills and this development, and I was so excited. I was like, hey, this is my opportunity, because there's so few houses that come up and they're not affordable. I was ready. I had everything to do. But the more I learned about it, the more I was disappointed and knew that wasn't going to be a solution for me. I surprised myself by actually considering and accepting an opportunity that came in another community in Alaska. And this was not just because I could not find housing here to put down roots and to purchase a home here, but that was a huge factor. I wanted to make Girdwood my home. I still do. I love this community. I'm very sad. I'm shocked at myself for actually taking this step. But I couldn't see that future here because I wanted a place to call my own. And I can't afford that in this community. But I am a contributing community member. I want to be here, and I think that we truly need an area plan, something that will fit this community for workforce housing, for people like myself that want to be active members in this community, want to make it their home, want to set down roots, that are frustrated by this process, but want to see it work for Girdwood. So please, listen to the community, listen to the stories you've heard, listen to the people that have expertise in this area, and find a plan for development that works. We're not opposed to development, but we need something that works for this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Tatiana Lawson.
Good evening. I would like to thank the Assembly for giving us a second chance to talk about this tonight. My name is Tatiana Lawson. I'm a homeowner. I've been in Girdwood since 2012. I have 2 kids. I'm an EMT. I have a master's in teaching. Over the years in this community, I've been a ski coach, a babysitter, a school teacher, and an EMT on skis. I'm fortunate enough tonight to be the ski patrol director, and I lead a group of people that I care about tremendously. These are people that rescue people in the community. They work on avalanches. They educate in avalanches. I work with OEC, which is Outdoor Emergency Care Technicians, nurses, doctors. We deal with fatalities. We deal with injuries that are life-changing when people visit our town. I am privileged enough to work with Girdwood Fire and to work with the volunteer fire department and paramedics and EMTs in this town. I hire people at $18 an hour, which is a big change from what it used to be. I used to hire people at $10.50 an hour 3 years ago. We average 500 calls, over 500 calls in 4 months. We are really hardworking. Currently, I walk my kids around empty homes on our way to the park. I'm losing my community. Patrollers cannot afford to buy houses where they live. I have watched skilled workers leave. One of my most skilled workers is not here tonight because she is on an ambulance service in the borough. In the Mat-Su. I'm going to read a testimony from her. Her name is Lynn Whitcomb. I am a Girdwood renter. Over the past 16 years, I have rented 6 different rentals. I have looked at near 20 houses to purchase in Girdwood and made 2 offers to 2 different houses. I used to live in my van. Now I'm a professional worker as a paramedic. I left 2 long-time local EMS jobs to work in the Mat-Su borough so that I could make more money to compete with the housing market. I am also a local parent, and I am active in the community with volunteering opportunities and supporting in the school. My partner and I make approximately $200,000 a year, and I still cannot afford to live in Girdwood. The last home I made an offer on, I had to put a $25,000 over the asking price just to be competitive, and the house still went to $90,000 over the asking price in a cash offer. This was just over 1 year ago. I want to see housing that Girdwood locals can have preference to over the housing that is built in our community. I also wish to see that houses do not always go to the highest cash offers, especially when they are second homes. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Mari Parks.
Hello, my name is Mari Parks. I've lived in Girdwood for 22 years, and I'm going to talk really fast because I'm also on the board of Girdwood Community Land Trust, and we lost 2 minutes. So, 2019, we've been discussing housing and the issues here in Girdwood as a organization and also as a member of this community. December 2020, we tried to get an appraisal and follow the rules. It didn't quite work out. We can discuss that later. You may have heard that Spinell Homes submitted the first application for the RFP. As it was published in the Anchorage Daily News, we're attempting to correct that error. 3 months after submitting our application, and Girdwood Community Land Trust, aka Mari Parks, is a resident of Girdwood, with our board members, we were reached out to by Spinell and advised that they turned in an application in February of 2021. It was discussed by HLB representatives on public meetings that because they received 2 applications and because Spinell's was considered complete, it would be going to RFP. This contradicted what many community members have been told by HLB, that development would not occur until the new area plan was completed. When we saw the RFP come out, we were shocked to see how large the offered acreage was and the possible impact that this would have on our community. Working under the gun and under a short time frame, we asked the submitting parties to include us as a partner on RFP responses, but in the end we were not included, although mentioned in both RFP responses. We were not privy to details of what was in either RFP until the redacted versions were made public. From the beginning of the RFP process, we advocated for the developers to include workforce housing and a community garden. In an effort to get started right away, our mission of workforce housing, we proposed the inclusion of a 10-unit project, but again, no projects were included in the proposal. Feeling extremely discouraged, we continued to support our mission. We proceeded forward with other projects and goals that we could focus on while Holton Hills continued. That includes recycling, and we helped start a farmer's market. We are very into food security. I encourage you to research community land trust not only as a mechanism for achieving affordability in resort towns, but really all over Anchorage. Community land trust can be as small as one street, but their impact's vast. They have a 40-year history and roots in the civil rights movement. Market rate lots on public land do not equal public benefit. Girdwood Community Land Trust is synonymous with solutions for our future. Community gardens, recycling, workforce housing, food security. Again, I encourage you, I beseech you to look into community land trust. It is a viable option. And as you've heard many people say, we are not against development. We just want it to benefit our beautiful town and for us to keep.
Thank you for your testimony. Your time is up. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Lisa Miles.
Ready? Hello. You've heard many professional testimonies tonight. I'd like to offer a personal one. My name is Lisa, and I rent and work in Girdwood. I've heard in the many municipal meetings I've attended these last 2 years about Anchorage addressing homelessness and how many beds can be funded. My personal story, when I had to leave the home in Girdwood that I was in, there was no women's shelter or homeless shelter. The nearest was 40 miles away down a very dangerous highway. If it had not been for the kindness of women who offered me couches and futons for 7 weeks, I would not have been able to keep the independence I had to continue working without living in my car in the winter. But that's exactly what many of those who work in our tiny mercantile grocery and for other major employers here must do. I did find one of a very small number of, quote, affordable apartments here at Creekside.
which are now at $1,500 a month. But I'm one of the lucky ones. Girdwood's homeless don't show up on the census. I've since found a rental home, but even now, as you've heard many times, it's tenuous. I am so thankful to live in a community that cares about whether or not our fellow humans have somewhere to sleep at night. We know that housing costs is a nationwide issue, and we as a small Alaskan town should be able to solve this, except we are not our own town and have to ask the municipality of Anchorage to learn about who we even are or what we need. Our tax contributions, I believe, is the third highest, but what does Girdwood get for it? Do we get shelters, fire service, police, recycling, a food bank? No. These are things Girdwood has to do for ourselves, which is why I became a board member of a 9-member group, Girdwood Community Land Trust, to work on answers for our community needs. So this is why we are asking you to wait for our Girdwood area plan. We're asking you to halt Holton Hills to find out what we really need, because we believe that public land should meet public needs. Thank you very much for hearing us.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Karen Sakaro.
Hi, my name is Karen Sakaro. I've lived here over 20 years, raised a family, participated in lots of different community plans. The Girdwood South Town Site Master Plan I had a big hand in. I'm going to just try to give you a little perspective. I'm not going to ask you to pause on this. I actually think you should just stop it. And I think you have reasons to do so. I don't think the petitioner, the developer, acted in good faith. I think they deliberately tried to obscure the process, defer answers, rush things through. And I feel we were misled even from the beginning when they first got in front of us. So I don't think they've acted in good faith. I don't think HLB has acted with due diligence. And you can have a bunch of different reasons for that, but there were lots of opportunities where there could have been leadership from the investment group or HLB to provide a community process in a leadership kind of way. And that has not happened until you, the Assembly, have actually given a forum for the community to come out in an organized way. And you're listening. The problem is we need somebody to actually facilitate the solution. And I hear you asking questions, great questions, but I hope you don't think that you're going to be able to rush a solution. I don't think that's possible. And I think the suggestion that we stop this process and restart, go back to the area plan, whatever we do to have a proper planning process is what needs to happen. I think some of the ideas, we need to solve the housing crisis, but not every idea on the table has all the stakeholders that should have a voice about that idea. That takes time and a public process that's not just one person talking at a time. It takes dialogue. One of the last things is the fiduciary responsibility of the city. The deal that the investment company has right now, where all the infrastructure is paid for by the city, if you put that out on the street, you might get a much more competitive bid process. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Kevin Desmond. Good evening. My name is Kevin Desmond. I live in Lot 11, Block 13, Alyeska Subdivision Number 1. That's in the neighborhood of Girdwood. I moved from the village of Spenard to the village of Girdwood in 1980. Bought a lot with a cabin in 1981 and have been here pretty much ever since with a few excursions. Number one, I'd like to repeat what you've heard before. We thank the Assembly for taking your time. It's late in your evening. You guys are very patient. We're obviously a compassionate community. We feel pretty special about ourselves, so thank you for listening to us. I think you guys are tasked with something that's not very pleasant. You're dealing with a large fecal pellet in a punch bowl, and you're being asked to make a ruling on that.
I think you've heard other people speak more eloquently than I. There's not an area master plan. That's what you need. There is obviously no support from the community. The RFP process itself seemed to be pretty weak. Heritage Land Bank should not have dealt with only 2 viable bids or 1 viable bid, whatever they assessed it to be. Clearly, they needed to go out for rebid on the issue. My biggest objection to the whole thing is not having to do with the homelessness and the housing shortage and all of those things. I think it's a safety issue. Right now, the northern part of the school, the first block in the development, should be left available for the school, for future development of Girdwood School, for whatever it should be. Kids go hiking in that area, and they should be able to continue doing that. The safety issue is if one imagines long-haul trucks, lowboys, taking excavators past the MRC, past the clinic, past the post office, and then interrupting as kids are walking along the bike path to school. Every day, the construction going back and forth on that highway is just totally, or that road is totally irresponsible. I think it's a safety issue. The Assembly needs to be aware of it. Again, I thank you so much for your consideration of it. Access to that area should be from Crow Creek Road, and it should be forced into phase 1 of whatever development should take place. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will invite the next testifier to speak.
Jennifer Dirk.
Hello, I want to thank you for your time tonight. My name is Jennifer Dirks. I am a homeowner and I live here in Girdwood. I have a simple request is to vote to pause Holton Hills pending the completion of the area master plan. I'm a teacher in the community and one of the newest teachers. I was able to buy my home 7 years ago, or buy a lot 7 years ago and build my own home. I would not have been able to do that if I did not have a husband who was able to build the home, and there's no way that we would be able to buy a bigger house for our growing family. As a teacher, I have seen students struggle with finding housing. I have had student teachers who I hope to become my colleagues in the future have to leave our amazing community because they were unable to find housing. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, and now I see the same things that happened to my childhood home happening here in this community. I went from having neighbors and people you love in your community to empty houses for short-term rentals. It is not, we need to stop the short-term rentals in our community, and we need to look into different kind of solutions. Tahoe has made solutions where they have made short-term rentals on permits only so that we know and how many are in each neighborhood. They've also fast-tracked accessory dwellings for homes. Holton Hills is not the answer to our housing community or our housing crisis in our community. Please please pause on Holton Hills. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will welcome the next testifier to speak.
Michelle Weston.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Michelle Weston. I am a 12-year property owner in downtown Anchorage. I'm also a 26-year resident and 25-year property owner in Girdwood. I'm also, I think, one of the few people in Girdwood who worked for the Heritage Land Bank, who was a land management officer, and also worked on the Girdwood area plan, the Girdwood transportation plan, and all the planning that went into planning for future development in our community in the 90s. As a nonprofit employee that provides fire and rescue services, I don't think I can come out and say if for or against the project, but I would suggest that when I talked to a commission member from the Heritage Land Bank tonight, I found out that our comments that we submitted on June 22nd were not forwarded to the Heritage Land Bank Commission on behalf of the fire department. I find it curious that although we are a provider of fire and EMS services, we are not able to provide comments to either the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Heritage Land Bank Commission on projects in our area. I'd like to read you just some of the highlights from the comments that the Heritage Land Bank Commission chose not to forward to the commissioners. First, thank you for the opportunity. These future developments are in the wildland-urban interface. in terms of, and have potential in terms of wildland fire potential. Development should not be developed without inadequate fire supply and fire hydrants. We highly encourage residential sprinklers. Development should be built of fire-resistant materials, no wood-shake roofs. Private roads need to have enough width and grade for fire apparatus passage during snow load conditions. The impacts of traffic during construction need to be addressed. There's been a number of condo developments in Girdwood that have put, oh, 1 minute, is that the 1 minute mode? Okay, 1 minute, I will. We need affordable housing for firefighters. Most of our firefighters are now living outside of the community because they can't afford to live in Girdwood. Any large-scale development will increase the demand for fire and EMS services. Regardless of what you decide, we're still going to respond to people. We hope that the fire service area and the MOA will work with us on providing fire and EMS budget that allows for us to achieve our minimum staffing standard. We're not there right now. We had flat funding for EMS for this year, even though our costs went up significantly. And then finally, I humbly suggest that the funds raised by the HLB from any large developments in our community are reinvested back in the community to address the gaps in community public infrastructure which currently exist. I don't understand why the Heritage Land Bank doesn't ask us what we need in terms of providing infrastructure anymore, and I'd like to see that addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will invite the next testifier to speak.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ryan Hutchins-Kabibi. I'm a resident of Girdwood. Like everyone else you've heard from tonight, I want to encourage you to pause the Holt Hills project, take into account what the community has shared with you, and follow municipal code so that we can complete our area plan and come up with solutions that will help our community. I think the stories you've heard tonight should be compelling. I think that the volume of testimony you've heard should be compelling in your decisions. And I look forward to seeing you make a good choice for the community of Girdwood, and I think ultimately that will benefit the entire municipality. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, so I will invite the next testifier to speak.
Robert Wolf.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Robert Wolf. I've lived in Girdwood 33 years. I provide snow removal in Girdwood the past 30 years. I have over 300 contracts that rely on me to get the town cleared daily. The negative response from the community is a referendum on the way Heritage Land Bank has managed lands in Girdwood. We have an industrial park that has sat barren for 30 years. I've been trying for 15 to get a spot there, and I still have a land use permit that gets me 180 days notice to get out. I need to plan how I'm going to move my business forward. And for the last 5 years, I've been asked, or I had asked, the Girdwood Board of Supervisors to put the Girdwood Industrial Park on the radar, and they did. They had a referendum that put the community priority was to get the industrial park done. Heritage Land Bank did nothing, and now they want to build another community. They need to plan. They need to plan so I can plan. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room to speak?
Anybody else? Looks like no one else.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank municipal staff and community members who helped to organize that room, and thank all the Girdwood residents for coming and attending. I'll go ahead and come back to the room and ask if anyone else in the room would like to testify. Anyone at all? Seeing and hearing no one. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted on the agenda with the clerk's note, it is the intent of Assembly leadership to ask the body to take no action at this special meeting tonight.
15 to get a spot there, and I still have a land use permit.
Thank you. After the public hearing is closed, there will need to be a motion to postpone action, or I would ask for a motion to postpone action to another meeting. I am actually prepared to make that motion after the public hearing is closed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, the public hearing on AO 2022-103 is closed. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to postpone this item to a special meeting on Tuesday, January 17.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item first came before the Assembly for action on December 6th. Because we had anticipated high public interest in this item, we did have an Assembly work session before any legislation was introduced, which was later in the month in November, with an S version submitted to the addendum on December 1st. So my point is that this item is only now coming to the Assembly for the first time for action. We have allowed more time with smaller projects like the one in West Anchorage concerning the rustic goat, which was postponed at least twice, maybe 3 times over multiple months as the administration and the developer and the community worked out the project and some of the issues with the proposal. We have heard some concerns from the administration about the time required to move this project through the entitlement process, so the permitting and entitlements, the land use portion can be completed so construction can proceed this summer. Again, this item has only now come to the Assembly in December, and so I believe that is a very optimistic time frame, given that there is more work to be done and that there are efforts underway. An S1 version was referenced, and there is work being done to address the many community concerns that we have heard over these 2 days of public testimony. It is worth getting this right. It's worth taking the time to try to address the concerns. We have scheduled a work session in Girdwood, tentatively, if it works out, for January 6th. I think later in the evening, either 4:30 or 5 p.m. We're still working out the final details. And while I think an argument can be made to take much more time than 5 weeks, I think it makes sense to take a look at the forthcoming S1 version, meet with the community, make attempts to specifically address the concerns that have been raised, and then come back in a little over 5 weeks to meet and convene to take up this issue again. And I think that we'll have a much better sense after a work session and an S1, possible S1 version, as to the time frame, a possible time frame going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go through the queue for folks wanting to speak on the motion to postpone, starting with Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I support Ms. LaFrance's reasoning for the postponement. However, I don't support a special meeting. As the member with the pen on the S1, I am aiming to try to get that into hopefully the addendum to have put into the record on the meeting of December 20th. I do agree with the work session in Girdwood tentatively scheduled. So my preference is that we look at January 10th, which feels maybe optimistic to get feedback and then turn around on a weekend before a regular meeting. So then we have another regularly scheduled meeting the 24th of January. I do realize we have, that is also the bond deadline. However, I don't, and I'm in the ballot deadline, I'm sorry, I misspoke, but I don't see that getting through our business would be insurmountable, and worst case, anything that was not a must-pass on that night would just get pushed to the next meeting. So while I'm supportive of the concept, I'm not supportive of a special meeting, and would prefer to look at one of the regularly scheduled meetings in January. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Voland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate, well, Chair, do I call you Chair LaFrance in this instance, Member LaFrance? I appreciate your wanting to take a little bit more time with this. I have concerns about extending the timeline out that far. I think I feel similarly to Member Zalatel in that we don't need another special meeting. I think we've had a special meeting tonight and we've had 2 assembly work sessions on this. I also think that if we extend out too far, we're going to lose the benefit of having members on this body who have had a lot of emails to digest, who have been able to hear public testimony, and if we bring on new members to the body, they may not be as familiar. I mean, they're really going to have to catch up to speed. They're not going to have had the benefit of being able to digest all the emails that we have and been able to talk with constituents. And so I'd really like to get this done on a quicker timeline for my part. And I do appreciate all the work that is going into the S1 version. But January 17th, I don't know. I mean, how long are we going to have Member Dunbar and Member Allard and Member Quinn Davidson who have been part of this conversation now? That's a concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I can answer 2 of those questions. I believe Ms. Quinn Davidson is going to serve until April. She hasn't indicated to me that she's going to just not run for re-election. I am going to resign on January 3rd, so it doesn't matter if you extend until the 10th or the 17th. If you push it into January, I will not be able to vote on it. I'll say for my part, and again, I'm not going to be on this body, I don't think having a special meeting on the 17th is a bad idea, but you might consider trying to get this done on the 10th and then having the 17th as a fallback. The chair can declare a special meeting in that time frame, just so that you can try to get to some kind of resolution before the final meeting in January, because the final meeting in January is when you put things on the ballot. So it's an incredibly, you can do it before, but that's usually where things end up in it, things like the bond. It ends up being an incredibly busy meeting. And so I apologize that I won't be here in January to help y'all work through all of that. I will say, for me, this public testimony has really highlighted the importance of a short-term rental ordinance in Girdwood, both some kind of restriction in this property, but just the testimony you've got is just an incredible vacancy rate and a need for a more broader regulation of short-term rentals. Now, I know that Member Solt is working on an ordinance like that. Unfortunately, it hasn't been introduced yet, which means the earliest it could be heard at public testimony would be the 10th of January if you plan to introduce it on the 20th of December. But I think, I guess, for my part, I would ask Member or Chair Quinn LaFrance to amend her motion to move it to the 10th, so that you can potentially do that work But keep in mind that you might have to declare a special meeting anyway, because January does get very busy, and I think you're going to want to talk about that short-term rental ordinance if we can go forward. I also received an email today from Mike Edgington from GBOS talking about a potential ordinance. Actually, I see you, Mike. I see you in the. Is it okay to talk about this? I mean, how? Okay. Where the entity that GBOS represents might take some additional powers in terms of affordable housing and economic development. That would require a vote of the people, so you'd have to put that on the ballot. Again, probably if it's introduced on the 20th, earliest you could vote on that as the 10th. So there's a lot of these moving pieces that at the earliest I think could be voted on the 10th. And that means I will not be able to vote on them. I can't speak to Member Allard, but I do believe Ms. Quinn Davidson will be here. So I will support a motion to postpone, but I would recommend for the mover and the seconder to change it to January 10th. Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair. Apologies.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to speak in support of Ms. LaFrance's motion for two main reasons. One is that I think, as Mr. Dunbar has stated, January meetings tend to be very busy, tend to be very full of items, as we have a lot of energy coming into the new year, and then we're getting ready to place items on the ballot for the April election. I think in addition, I don't know exactly how this process is going to work. I don't have it mapped out in my head yet, but assuming that we get new members to replace Mr. Dunbar and Miss Allard, I think the earliest that might happen is the first meeting in January would be the earliest it could happen. So I wouldn't want to throw new members right into this huge issue the very first day that they are sworn into their job. So that is why every meeting, yes, but I think this is a big something that should be considered very carefully. So I think January 17th gives those potentially two new members more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Ms. Allard.
Yeah, I really wanted the honor of being able to vote on this. I don't think there should be any sort of delay. I don't think we have the votes for it to even pass, but thank you for recognizing that. And I don't know when I'm going to leave the assembly. I kind of like hanging out for a little bit.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the suggestion to modify the motion. However, I'm going to stick with a special meeting on January 17 for the reasons that both Mr. Rivera and Mr. Dunbar mentioned regarding ballot props and bonds that will be needing to be acted upon by that second meeting in January. I think that asking for a month time, especially during a period that spans the holiday season, is very reasonable, though I completely understand any members who aren't thrilled about the idea of a special meeting. I get that, and I thanks for being here tonight and for all the time that you put into this job, but with all due respect, I won't be modifying the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, so I have a few more folks in the queue. Going to start with Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments. First, I want to thank everyone who called in or came out tonight to testify. It was compelling, and really loved how respectful and informed and thoughtful all of the testimony was tonight. So just really a huge thanks to the Girdwood community and everyone who came out tonight. Second, I really want to encourage my colleagues to support this postponement. I think there's more work to be done on this, and we really want to make sure we get this right. I want to support colleague Ms. LaFrance in terms of postponing this to a meeting 7. I think for all the reasons that have been stated, that's prudent. So want to encourage my colleagues to support the motion to postpone, and just thanks everybody for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Next I have Mr. Cross.
Yeah, I would just support the meeting of the 17th. I anticipate we're going to see quite a few amendments, so there's going to be a lot for us to chew on, and I think that actually works to our benefit in the long run. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we postpone to the 17th, I would just like to state, because I've worked exceedingly long hours to get an S1 moving and to get it so it can be published in the agenda on the 20th, I really do hope, maybe not before the holiday, but very shortly thereafter, and definitely before the work session, that my colleagues can take a look at it so that when we hit the work session on the 6th, we can have a conversation, talk about potential amendments, and then get those amendments kind of prepared ahead of time if we are going to see a lot of amendments. We knew this public hearing was going to occur, and that we were going to be looking at having to take action on this. So, and I think we've all been fairly steeped in it. I agree. The public testimony has definitely brought forward more work on the ordinance to hopefully get us closer. That said, a special meeting, I'm torn about a special meeting. I get all the reasons, but special meetings are expensive, and they take a lot out of the staff and everyone else. And if this either has a must-pass and a deadline associated with it, or it doesn't. And I guess that's what I'm unclear about, is there an urgency driving this that it couldn't be set for the last meeting in January? And if we aren't able to take it up, it gets bumped to the first meeting in February. So with that, if the will of the body is for a special meeting, great. I just hope we're all very prepared at that special meeting, and we do the work in the meantime. Thanks.
Thank you. And the clerk did want me to clarify that even if this motion is approved and this item is postponed to January 17th, that you are still able to add to the agenda for the December 20th meeting an S1 version. Next, I have Mr. Voland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, again, I really appreciate the work that Member Zolotel is doing on this S1 version, and if it's okay, I'd like to ask her a question, because I know Meg's in a very tenuous position right now. She's having to find this middle path, and when we talk about lots of amendments coming forward, well, that could essentially prevent us from reaching a compromise that works for various parties. And so I guess my question for Meg is, so on that timeline, January 17th, to your knowledge, is that going to work in trying to effectuate a collaboration, a compromise, and essentially giving a window for a version that incorporates some of Girdwood's feedback to move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Voland. I think the S1 does a lot of that already, and is really responsive. And what I was trying to say in my last comments, I think might get to your question, which is if there are amendments, I hope that because the S1, the intention is to have it published in the agenda on the 20th, so you'll have it in advance, that those amendments could likely come to the work session on the 6th, so that we have time in advance of the 17th to figure out, if this motion passes, to figure out where that might land us, and if there is consensus about any of the amendments. I know we won't be voting on them, but there would be the opportunity to possibly take them back and incorporate them.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have one more person in the queue, then hopefully we can vote on the motion. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. I would like to know if we can go ahead and amend the motion to be able to vote on or to have the special assembly meeting on 16 January, which is a Monday. And I did get we don't know if it's available. And I'm going to be very candid. I've listened to a lot of testimony, and I want to be able to vote this. I want to be able to be present and vote on this. And it's really important to me. I've had people in Eagle River reach out, friends in Girdwood, and I want to be able to be involved on this.
Thank you. So a quick response to that, Ms. Allard. I've just been informed that the 16th is a holiday. It's MLK Day.
Well, then I guess we have to move it a couple days sooner. Yeah. I don't know where my calendar is. Ms. LaFrance and Mr. Schultz, would you guys be willing to do it on the Friday prior to the holiday? What's that? It would be the 9th of, well, wait, no, that's wrong. Yeah, it would be Friday the 13th.
So I will give the clerical response, and then I don't know if Ms. LaFrance wants to give a more substantive response. So the Assembly, we know that we can use the room on Tuesdays because we have reserved the rooms every Tuesday, but it is unknown at this time whether the room is reserved or not on that Friday that you are suggesting. And if Ms. LaFrance has any other substantive response.
I don't actually, without conferring offline with the clerk and looking at the calendar.
Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, because you guys are sitting next to each other. I'm speaking to Mr. Solt over here on a sidebar, and he suggested just going back to, don't we have an assembly meeting on the 10th?
If I may jump in, you may certainly make the motion to amend the amendment. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
All right, then I'm just going to motion to amend the amendment for the 10th of January, please.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Did you want to speak to it any further, Ms. Allard?
Nope, I think that I said, well, yes. You know, I've been involved since the beginning, and I just want to be able to have that ability to support the community and how they want, and just, yeah, I've said enough. Thanks.
Thanks. Ms. LaFrance on the new motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit torn here because I feel strongly that, you know, a month time is not asking for a whole lot and is very reasonable. However, I understand Ms. Allard's desire to be a part of this item. I guess I would be willing to support this motion provided that you know, the body will continue, of course, in good faith, and there is, you know, if we really can't get through it or work through it on the 10th, that we would consider a special meeting on the 17th. Yeah, I have really mixed feelings about this.
I would do it for any one of you on the body.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, members may proceed to vote on the motion to postpone to January 10. Or, excuse me, it's the amendment to the motion. That's what we're voting on. Thank you.
Mr. Perez-Verdia, on the motion to amend?
No.
Okay. Ms. Solitow?
Yes.
And I believe, Mr. Constant, are you on the phone? Okay. Ms. LaFrance.
That motion passes 7-3, so this item will be back before the body on January 10th.
We should vote on that.
Oh, yeah, dang it.
Mr.
All
Chair.
right, now we're going to vote again. So that motion has been amended. So now the new motion before us is to postpone this item to January 10th. So members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
That motion is approved 10-0, so this item will be back before us on January 10th. With that, I will go ahead and turn the gavel back to Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. I very much appreciate you chairing that portion of the meeting. So we are now at audience participation, and if there are any members of the public who wish to speak, please come forward, state your name for the record, and the area of the community in which you live. You'll have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Irene Queetnow again, Sand Lake. I have 2 things. One, I'm a little puzzled why Ms. Zalatel is in charge of determining what the deadline is for finding a compromise for this ordinance. I would appreciate an explanation for that. And secondly, during the last meeting and many other meetings, you as the Assembly have asked the mayor to not bring things forward so late. I remember Mr. Constant saying last meeting that Friday, before the Tuesday meeting is very late. Well, I would ask that you take your own advice and that you bring forward things in a timely manner for the public to see. Last Tuesday, I think I picked up between 6 and 8 laid on the table items, which means I have to read them while I'm here at the meeting, which does not give much time to make any comments. So I would just greatly encourage you to take your own advice and bring things forward in a timely manner so the public has an opportunity to read it before the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Are there any other members of the public who wish to participate? If so, please come forward. Seeing no one else, we will go ahead and continue on to Assembly member comments, starting to my right with Ms. Allard.
No, I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Soltz?
So I'll just say that, yes, we are working on short-term rental legislation. It borrows from communities such as Ridge, but we will not have it ready for introduction next week.
Thank you, Mr. Soltz. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, a thank you to everyone that came out tonight to testify. I really appreciated the thoughtful and informed testimony. Have a good night. Please drive safely.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Cross?
Yeah, hey, Randy, do you already have a third on that? Oh, you already do? Okay, never mind. Nope, no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo comments made by Mr. Perez-Verdia. Really appreciate the tenor and tone of the public hearing. It was passionate at times and, compared to our average, was a little lengthier than normal. But I really appreciated how everyone followed the rules of the chambers. Which is, interesting that I even have to point that out, but I will say it is much appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, echoing the thanks for the testimony, that also that there was the Girdwood option tonight in Girdwood. It went really smoothly, so thanks to all involved in organizing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This will be my last opportunity to comment on this ordinance, I believe. And so I want to, again, I sit on this side of the dais, so I'm often repeating what my colleagues said. I want to thank the folks that testified today and earlier. Despite the obvious passion that people brought, it was incredibly respectful and substantive public testimony. I think one of the best I've encountered on this body in almost 7 years. And I really appreciate the specifics that a number of folks in the community came forward with. I did not expect to hear from the mayor of Breckenridge or the former mayor of Breckenridge tonight, so that was impressive for whoever convince them to provide us with some more information. Again, I will not have an opportunity to vote on this, but I hope that a compromise can be reached because I do think that there is a lot of common ground. It seems like the folks from Girdwood are saying what the people on this body believe, which is we need more affordable housing in Anchorage, and particularly in Girdwood, where you have this incredibly unique and challenging set of circumstances. So I just hope that folks will continue to work on this in good faith and see from, there's many different parties with many different interests, but I think that there is that common ground. I hope you can find it, and I hope that in the coming years we can produce that workforce housing in Girdwood that we all want to see built. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Volin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo my colleagues in appreciation of all those who have testified, and for that, the respectful tenor. I will say that I hope the Girdwood area plan proceeds with haste. We did fund with some of the ARPA dollars the Girdwood area plan, sort of anticipating its completion. And I will also go further to say that I hope that that plan, when it is complete, reflects some of the testimony that we heard in terms of density and multifamily and building vertical. So I look forward to that. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone, whether in Girdwood or Anchorage Bowl, Eagle River, anyone who used their snowblower to the benefit of their neighbors, who helped push a car, who helped dig out, who helped with snow removal in any way. Thank you for taking care of your neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Volin. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I believe we learned a lot tonight and through testimony in the previous meetings as well. Issues have been brought to the forefront that we need to find solutions to. Fortunately, Girdwood is not the first ski community to have gone through this, and so we don't have to totally reinvent the wheel. Girdwood is totally unique compared to anywhere else, and that's probably a good thing. And so I think this can be done. We've have worked together as a team on this, I believe, and looking forward to seeing the S version. And I believe that we can move this forward and get housing developed. One of the very first testifiers tonight was talking about it being 5 to 7 years before any additional housing would be built in Girdwood. And having been a small businessman for many, many years, I could only imagine how challenging it would be to try to keep your small business open for all that amount of time with very few employees. And so I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to weave our way through this so that housing can be developed faster than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, and I will just reiterate my appreciation for the very respectful, productive testimony that we heard, particularly from members of the Girdwood community. Thank you for participating in this process. I really appreciate your feedback and the way in which you've been involved with the process. And definitely, as it's been stated here tonight, there is a severe need for attainable housing throughout our community, especially in Girdwood. And as Mr. Dunbar and others have noted, we need to take a broad look at other areas of policy to help address this very, very pressing need. And with that, I would just say thank you to all the members for being here for this special meeting, and to staff. And Mr. Chombley, I know you had other stuff going on. Thank you for being here as well. And with that, that brings us to adjournment. Is there a motion?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.